Chapter 993. After the appearance of the fourth tribulation lightning, the fifth tribulation lightning followed closely behind. Upon seeing this scene, Chu Luiyue widened her eyes in shock and confusion. What's going on? Buzz. Another buzzing sound came from the water droplet. Ripples appeared on its surface, and the 6 lines on it started to tremble violently. In the sky, the fifth tribulation lightning seemed to be responding to it, and it quickly gathered. An ominous feeling surfaced in Chu Luiyue's heart. You can't be. Buzz. Another buzzing sound came from the water droplet, and another loud roar came from the clouds. Kaboom! Silver light flashed, and the sixth tribulation lightning also emerged from the dark clouds. Chu Luiyue's pupils shrank, and her heart sank rapidly. She guessed correctly. This commotion was caused by the water droplet. It was actually provoking the tribulation lightning. After the shock, Chu Luiyue's feelings were indescribable. She would never have thought that the one who brought her the greatest danger was not anyone else, but herself. The tribulation lightning was supposed to come one after another, and when she was ready, she could face it directly. How could so many tribulation lightning appear at once? Chu Luiyue's eyelids twitched, and she gritted her teeth. You don't want me to die fast enough? The water droplet ignored Chu Luiyue's question, and it continued to buzz. What followed was the continuous appearance of tribulations of lightning. The 6th, the 7th, the 8th. Almost in the blink of an eye, 5 tribulation lightning appeared in the sky. Taizu did not speak for a long time. When the 9th tribulation lightning gradually appeared, he finally could not help but speak. Girl, tell me honestly, what sin have you committed? Taizu's tone was serious and sincere, because he was asking this question sincerely. Other than this reason, he really couldn't figure out why Chu Luiyue could summon so many lightning tribulations at once. One had to know that this was different from the ones summoned when forging divine artifacts. It was unknown how much stronger it would be. Earlier, with his help, they had barely managed to stop the 3 bolts of tribulation lightning. There were so many of them appearing at once. The entire ancient Phoenix Mountain would most likely be blasted into ruins. How could Chu Luiyue's frail body withstand it? Chu Luiyue was speechless at Taizu's question. She had long known that the water droplet had its own arrogance, and was definitely not obedient. Under most circumstances, it wouldn't cause any commotion. However, once they moved, they were not to be underestimated. This was also the main reason why Chu Luiyue didn't use it often. Too much energy could easily cause trouble. Who would have thought that he would still fail this time? She only wanted to break through to become a rank 7 warrior, not be struck to death by these lightning tribulations in front of everyone. Facing Chu Luiyue's question, it didn't seem to care much, and continued to devour the surrounding golden force quickly. At the same time, it let out a final buzzing sound. Chu Luiyue closed her eyes and looked up in despair. The 9th lightning tribulation had almost completely gathered. This was 6 lightning tribulations. Long Yuan sword. Taizu. Pure gold sacred armor? In front of these 6 lightning tribulations, all of them seemed so insignificant. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath, and her mind spun wildly, trying to find a way to solve the current predicament. However, after thinking about it, she realized that she was wasting her brain power in vain. This situation was simply unsolvable. The onlookers were also stunned by this scene. It wasn't that they had never seen a cultivator trying to break through to rank 7, nor was it that they had never seen a god's tribulation. Those who could come here were all dragons and phoenixes among men. They were either top geniuses or peerless powerhouses. All of them were people of high status and tyrannical strength. What kind of storms and waves had these people not experienced? However, this scene really shocked them on the spot. God's tribulation. God's tribulation can actually have so many lightning tribulations at the same time. Gong Sunjiao's face was pale. Her eyes widened as she stared at the scene on the main peak, and her lips trembled slightly. The God's tribulation had always appeared one by one, and once the cultivator succeeded in meeting it, the process would immediately stop. Several lightning tribulations appearing at the same time. This was unheard of. This is 6 lightning tribulations plus the previous 3. This This is 9 lightning tribulations. Ning Yuan had already stood up, and his eyes were fixed on everything that was happening with a solemn expression. Rumor has it that if one can summon the 7th god's tribulation, it means that one will definitely reach the peak of rank 9 in the future. If one can summon the 8th god's tribulation, they will be able to enter the god's realm. And now, Shangguan Yu had summoned 9. What this meant was simply self-evident. At the same time, it was also shocking. Although Jun Qiji's expression was still calm, his fists were already clenched tightly. Back then, even the 9 ministers could only summon 8 lightning tribulations. Didn't this mean that Shangguan Yu's talent and potential in the future were even stronger than the 9 ministers? Tan Taichen's eyes were dull, and his body seemed to have been drained of energy. His limbs were weak, but his breathing was rapid. He took 2 steps back and barely managed to sit back down on the chair. But his heart was in a mess. 9 lightning tribulations. If she could really withstand it, impossible. Tan Taichen shook his head violently. Under 6 lightning tribulations, Shangguan Yu would definitely die. Between heaven and earth, there was only silence. Around the main peak of the ancient Phoenix Mountain, all the spectators looked at the lightning tribulations that almost lit up the dark sky, and all of them fell silent. Chu Luyue stared at the sky fixedly. The bright light almost blinded her eyes. She remembered that when she was Shangguan Yu, she had summoned 8 lightning tribulations. This time, there were 9 lightning tribulations. Moreover, they appeared almost at the same time. Girl, what should we do? Taizu asked in a low voice. If the girl was destined to face such a calamity, then even if he had to give up this strand of his soul and scatter it, he would still save her. Chu Luyue took a deep breath, and the corners of her lips curled up. Of course, we'll do what we have to do. No matter what method we use, we just have to endure it. As soon as she finished her sentence, she heard an old and hoarse voice in her ears. Ha, ignorant child, you're really naive. Chu Luyue's expression froze, and then her gaze turned sharp as she looked at the arrow not far away. Ever since she summoned the god's tribulation, it had stopped at the side and did not try to attack her. Beiming Taizu? Chu Luyue narrowed her eyes. Other than this person, there was no other choice. You're indeed a rare genius, but unfortunately, you've come to the wrong place. This endless force was originally left by this old man for the Beiming bloodline. You should be punished for trying to snatch it. Now this god's tribulation is enough to take your life without this old man's help. Chu Luyue's lips curled into an extremely cold smile. Is that so? Originally, I wasn't very interested in this thing, but since you said so, then I'll snatch this divine power of yours first. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 994. Chu Luyue waved her hand. A scarlet flame quickly appeared in her palm. Then she flicked her wrist. Smack! The sound of something breaking through the air resounded through the mountain. A crimson flaming whip flew out in an instant. It flew straight towards the arrow. Ha! You don't know what's good for you. The Dark North Taizu sneered. With the 6 lightning tribulations above, Chu Luyue was facing a great disaster, and could not even take care of herself. Under such circumstances, she still wanted to snatch the divine power that he had left behind? She was dreaming. Chi! The beautiful arrow quickly circled around, and went straight for Chu Luyue from another direction. After being tortured by the first 3 lightning tribulations, the Long Yuan sword had almost exhausted all its energy, and could not fight anymore. To the Dark North Taizu, this was undoubtedly a huge opportunity for him to attack. Originally, he had wanted to be a bystander, and watch the lightning tribulations deal with her. He did not expect her to be so arrogant. Since that was the case, there was no harm in him attacking first to teach her a lesson. Smack! The long arrow that contained divine power was extremely fast, but Chu Luyue's red flame whip seemed to have grown eyes and quickly wrapped around it. Boom! The scorching flame burned wildly. You do have some tricks up your sleeves. Unfortunately, in front of divine power, these are nothing but cheap tricks. The old and hoarse voice was full of coldness. The next moment, the colorful flowing light on the arrow flew up rapidly. It transformed into countless flying knives and directly cut the surrounding space. One after another, black spatial cracks appeared in the air. The red flame whip was also directly cut apart. Swoosh! The arrow broke free and went straight for Chu Luyue again. A strong desire to fight flashed across Chu Luyue's eyes. And then she waved her other hand lightly. A transparent flame silently flew out of her palm like a stream of water. It transformed into a huge net in midair and directly spread in the direction of the arrow. Do you think you can stop this old man by using the same method twice? The Dark North Taizu was obviously disdainful of Chu Luyue's attack. The arrow did not slow down at all. Instead, it rushed over at an even faster speed. Several colorful light blades surrounded it, and they were extremely sharp. It looked like they were going to tear the huge net formed by the transparent flame in front of it. However, the moment the tip of the arrow made contact with it, the giant transparent net quickly spread out. It displayed an astonishing tension. This move not only did it avoid a fierce confrontation between the two sides, but it also caused the colorful light blades flying at the edge to lose their advantage. This time, it was as if he had punched cotton. He felt extremely aggrieved. "You're so young, but you're so cunning." The Dark North Taizu snorted coldly, and the aura of the arrow's aura instantly. The sound of the terrifying power grinding against space was especially ear-piercing. Several black spatial cracks appeared around the tip of the arrow, but the transparent flame was not torn apart. It was still intact, and it was still intact and was still. The Dark North Taizu then realized that something was wrong. This transparent flame, there was something fishy. However, by the time he realized this, it was already too late. The transparent flame net quickly shrank, trapping the arrow within. At the same time, the scarlet flame whip surged over again, covering the outside with another layer. A double-layered cage was instantly formed. The Dark North Taizu did not care about these two balls of flames before, but he soon realized that he could not break free from this cage. The beautiful and sharp arrow tried repeatedly, but it was blocked time and time again. At this moment, the Dark North Taizu realized that he had underestimated Chu Luyue's strength. "What is this?" His tone began to become flustered and exasperated, with a hint of mania. Chu Luyue slowly wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth and sneered, but she did not explain. This scarlet flame was formed by the water droplets in her dantian. The transparent flame was the karmic fire that had been enshrined in the heavenly square cauldron for thousands of years. Its power was enough to suppress a divine beast, like the legendary three-eyed eagle, for thousands of years. It could even destroy its body and soul. These two were not ordinary items. Any one of them would be enough to make him suffer, let alone the two of them together. At the same time, Chu Luyue was still devouring the surrounding golden force. The endless force pouring down from the three essences, as one had almost been absorbed by Chu Luyue by 2/3. This speed was not slow, and when he thought about how she was only a rank 6 warrior, it was even more shocking. Jun Jiuqing's gaze was cold, and a faint blood color flickered in the depths of his pupils. That arrow contained a strand of Dark North Taizu's divine power. He could feel the hostility of Taizu towards Chu Luyue. Otherwise, he would not have taken the initiative to attack earlier. At that time, he wanted to persuade him, but he did not expect that in the blink of an eye, the situation would become like this. The one who had the upper hand was actually Chu Luyue? Her two flames were not ordinary. Otherwise it would be impossible for them to trap the divine power. Seeing that the flames were burning fiercely, the originally brilliant light on the arrow gradually dimmed. Jun Jiuqing felt a rare sense of uneasiness in his heart. He mobilized the force in his body, and his robes fluttered. Then he suddenly raised his hand, and an icy green chain was thrown out from his sleeve. It broke through the air. Green jade bone chain. The chain was faintly cold. At first glance, it looked like it was carved out of high-quality green jade, and it seemed very fragile. But wherever it passed, the void collapsed directly. It was enough to show the power of this chain. In the blink of an eye, the chain flew in front of the ball of flames. Poof! The two forces collided, one cold and one hot. The moment they touched, there was an ear-piercing burning sound. Jun Jiuqing narrowed his eyes, and the power in his hand increased again. The cold air on the green jade bone chain instantly surged. It pierced straight forward. The arrow sensed Jun Jiuqing's power, and instantly charged forward. The internal and external forces overlapped, and a hole was finally torn in the boundary formed by the two layers of flames. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the green jade bone chain quickly wrapped around the arrow. Return! Jun Jiuqing retracted his wrist and took the opportunity to bring the arrow back. Chu Luyue seemed to have suffered a backlash from this force. Her body shook, and she spat out another mouthful of blood. Jun Jiuqing's gaze turned slightly, and his gaze paused on her pale face for a moment, and his brows furrowed slightly. Hey, you really treat her differently. An old and hoarse voice entered his ears. Jun Jiuqing's pupil shrank, and he looked at the arrow. Taizu, you misunderstood. Kid, who do you think I am doing this for? Dark North Taizu interrupted him and sneered. The endless force that ancient Phoenix Mountain has accumulated for 1,000 years, and this remaining divine power, is all for the descendants of my Dark North royal family to step into the god realm. But you are so willing to give it up, you really disappoint me. Jun Jiuqing's eyes darkened. Just as he was about to explain, he saw the arrow suddenly change direction and went straight for Chu Luyue. She seemed to have sensed something, and she turned around. Then a trace of shock flashed in her eyes. She immediately raised her hand to stop it, but it was already too late. Chi! The gorgeous arrow pierced Chu Luyue's chest. Chapter 995. In an instant, blood splattered everywhere. The warm, sweet, and fishy blood splattered on her face, making her look even more pitiful. Chu Luyue grabbed the tail of the arrow almost as soon as it pierced her body. However, the arrow had already pierced her chest, and was only half an inch away from her heart. Dark red blood gushed out from the wound. As she was wearing a red shirt, the blood gushing out was very inconspicuous. In addition, she had been constantly devouring the force, and had left many wounds and bloodstains on her body. It was even more difficult to identify the arrow now. However, that dazzling arrow was so clear that everyone could see it clearly as it flickered with a dazzling light. Luyu, Your Majesty, Yuan Jinghong, and the others saw this scene and exclaimed in unison. Mu Hongyu was about to rush over on impulse, but Jian Fengqi pulled her back. What are you doing? Saving Luyu. Mu Hongyu was extremely anxious and tried to pry his hand away. Why are you pulling me back? It'll be too late if you don't go now. You're still injured. Are you going to throw your life away? The usual carefree smile on Jian Fengqi's face disappeared and was replaced by a cold expression. In her current state, she wouldn't be of any help even if she went over. Mu Hongyu was so anxious that her eyes turned red. How do you know I can't do it? She has the faint Yuan body. I just need to go over and bring Luyu back first. Jian Fengqi grabbed her hand and pinned her to the side. He looked up and met her red almond eyes. His harsh words were stuck in his throat. He paused for a moment and the cold aura around him gradually calmed down. That arrow wasn't enough to kill her. How did you? If she didn't want to, that arrow wouldn't have had a chance to succeed. Jian Fengqi quickly explained, but Mu Hongyu and the others were instantly stunned. You mean? Mu Hongyu suddenly thought of something. She turned around and looked at Chu Luyue without blinking. Did she do it on purpose? Because it was too unbelievable. Mu Hongyu's voice was very soft, almost inaudible. But at least it was much more stable than before. Jian Fengqi heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. He also raised his eyes and looked over. There was a complicated look in his icy peach blossom eyes. He was definitely one of the people who knew Shengguan Yu the best in the world. Especially when she was fighting. After suffering so many losses, it wasn't for nothing. Mu Hongyu gritted her teeth and calmed down a lot. Jun Jiuqing was extremely powerful. If she went there alone, it would be extremely difficult for her to bring Chu Luyue back safely. Not to mention that she was still injured. Right now, she could only rely on herself. Yuan Jinghong looked at Jian Fengqi strangely. Just now, why was he so nervous about Mu Hongyu? He almost never showed such a cold expression to a woman. At that moment, could it be that he was really anxious? As if sensing his gaze, Jian Fengqi's expression changed slightly, and he glanced at him from the corner of his eyes. There was an undisguised warning in his eyes. Yuan Jinghong immediately stretched out his hand obediently and pulled his mouth. Only then did Jian Fengqi retract his gaze in satisfaction. He slightly loosened his grip on Mu Hongyu's hand, but he didn't completely let go. He just held it like that. Taizu. When the arrow suddenly flew back, Jun Jiuqing knew that something was wrong and immediately wanted to stop it. Unfortunately, he was a step too late. In the blink of an eye, the arrow had already pierced Chu Liyue's chest. Seeing blood gushing out of her chest, Jun Jiuqing's eyes were instantly drowned in blood. A bone-chilling coldness spread out from his body. The surrounding air seemed to have frozen. Madness, biting cold, fury. However, this emotion only lasted for a moment. Because in the next moment, he saw a ball of flame burning in Chu Liyue's hand that was holding the arrow's tail. The arrow was once again surrounded by flames. Only this time, the power of the flames seemed to be much stronger than before. In the blink of an eye, the color on the arrow quickly faded. Jun Jiuqing only heard Taizu's hurried shout, and the rest came to an abrupt end. As if sensing his gaze, Chu Liyue looked up. The corners of her blood-stained lips curled up slightly, and a sly and presumptuous smile appeared. Jun Jiuqing instantly understood. The blood in his eyes quickly faded, like the waves that were quickly calming down. When he looked again, all that was left was a calm and deep river. It was as if that moment of losing control was just an illusion. He adjusted his expression too quickly, so much so that no one noticed the change in his expression. You did that on purpose. Jun Jiuqing spoke slowly. Although it was a question, his tone was affirmative. Chu Liyue raised her eyebrows and her smile deepened. It seems that my acting skills are not good enough. But it's fine as long as it's enough, don't you think? She admitted it. Jun Jiuqing's expression was cold. When he attacked just now, Chu Liyue purposely pretended to be weak and released the arrow. She knew that Taizu had long wanted to kill her, and would definitely not let it go, so she deliberately let it go at this time. What she was waiting for was Taizu's counterattack. It's useless even if you snatch this divine power. If you can't eliminate Taizu's consciousness, then this divine power will never belong to you. Jun Jiuqing raised his hand. Return it to I. In exchange, I can help you. Thank you for your good intentions, but there's no need. Chu Liyue smiled brightly, and immediately pulled out the arrow. 2 balls of flames quickly spread from her palms, and completely surrounded it. Then its figure flashed and disappeared from everyone's sight. Jun Jiuqing frowned slightly, and his aura was faintly discernible. What do you want to do? It's not what I want to do, but what you're forcing me to do. As Chu Liyue spoke, she used the flames to set up a translucent barrier around them. At the same time, the arrow in Chu Liyue's dantian was quickly swallowed by the heavenly square cauldron. Sensing the heavy pressure coming from all directions, the Dark North Taizu finally realized that something was wrong and frantically tried to rush out. However, the heavenly square cauldron could even suppress the three-eyed eagle at its peak, let alone this incomplete divine power. No matter how the arrow struggled inside, the heavenly square cauldron did not move. What is this? The Dark North Taizu's voice had a hint of panic. How could a mere stage 6 warrior suppress his divine power? Chu Liyue's mind moved, and the transparent karmic fire began to burn wildly. A short and hurried shout was heard, and immediately, the arrow began to melt at a speed visible to the naked eye. This divine power, I'll take it. Chapter 996. Soon, within the heavenly square cauldron, the arrow transformed into a ball of light the size of a fist. Its entire body was colorful and extremely magnificent, and the divine power that was slowly emanating from it was enough to make one's heart tremble in fear. However, within the heavenly square cauldron, its little bit of power did not seem to have any deterrence. In addition to the crazily burning transparent karmic fire, there were also 2 Tian babies floating inside. One of them was slowly approaching the ball of divine power. When the 2 were extremely close to each other, the ball of light seemed to feel some kind of threat. Even the light on top of it dimmed a lot. With the 2 Tian baby watching over it, the ball of divine power finally became much more obedient. Refine his remaining consciousness, said Yi Futian. Chu Liyue instructed in her heart. As soon as she finished speaking, more flames instantly surged out of the heavenly square cauldron. The temperature also seemed to be much higher than before. The ball of light seemed to have sensed danger, and was ready to move. It rushed upwards again. Swoosh. The two Tian babies suddenly flew up quickly and directly passed through the middle of the ball of light. Poochie. With a sound, the ball of light was instantly dispersed. When the ball of light gathered together again, it was smaller than before, but it looked more pure and clean. The two Tian babies seemed to have fallen in love with this game and began to happily shuttle back and forth in the ball of light. Every time, it would make the ball of divine power purer. As for the remnant consciousness of the Dark North Great Ancestor, it was gradually dissipating under the repeated attacks. This made Chu Luiyue heave a sigh of relief. She turned her attention back to the golden force around her. At this time, she had almost devoured 4/5 of it. Of course, at the cost of this, her body was already covered in wounds and blood. Everything happened too quickly. Just when the crowd thought that Chu Luiyue would be crippled, even if she didn't die this time, they saw her directly pull out the arrow. Then the arrow disappeared, but Chu Luiyue was still fine. The speed at which she devours the force seems to have increased. Someone suddenly shouted, full of shock and disbelief. Everyone looked over. The golden origin power that filled the sky had indeed dissipated quite a bit compared to before. Without a doubt, they had all been devoured by Chu Luiyue. Logically speaking, her body shouldn't have been able to withstand so much origin power, and should have exploded long ago. But no. Jun Jiuqing cursed inwardly. Although he didn't intend to kill Chu Luiyue, this divine power still contained Taizu's consciousness. If it was taken away, he frowned and was about to attack. However, right at this moment, a loud bang suddenly resounded from the sky. Boom! He suddenly looked up and saw the 6 bolts of tribulation lightning swimming crazily in the clouds, about to strike down. Crack! A crack suddenly appeared on the ground beneath his feet. Jun Jiuqing's pupil shrank. The main peak of ancient Phoenix Mountain was where Taizu had broken through, so it had always been very hard. Previously, it had experienced many impacts, but it was still intact. Now that it suddenly cracked, it must be that the divine power had begun to be devoured by Chu Luiyue. With a thought, the cracks spread rapidly on the mountaintop. In the blink of an eye, it was like a spider web. Chu Luiyue looked up and glanced at it. She didn't have much time left. A trace of madness flashed in her eyes. Immediately, she closed her eyes and the aura around her suddenly erupted. The golden origin power around her suddenly sped up and surged into her body. Poof! Because the sudden surge of energy was too much, a bloody wound appeared on Chu Luiyue's wrist. However, this was just the beginning. Soon the same thing happened all over her body. Previously, she had some external injuries caused by similar reasons, so she bled so much. However, those were still under her control. She knew the limit of her endurance, so she could control it well. However, at this moment, she couldn't care less. The remaining golden origin power, which was close to 1/5, rushed into Chu Luiyue's body at an unimaginable speed. Bang! A crisp sound could be heard coming from his body. That was the sound of the Yuan Meridian exploding, because it couldn't withstand the terrifying energy. Girl, you're crazy! Taizu suddenly shouted. If the physical body was damaged, it could be recuperated and adjusted. However, if the Yuan Meridian was broken, the impact would be great. Moreover, at this juncture, the Yuan Meridian was extremely important. She was cutting off her own path. Because of the intense pain, Chu Luiyue's eyes were already scarlet red. Only the trace of determination in the depths of her eyes let others know that this was indeed her decision. I'm not crazy. Chu Luiyue's voice was very soft, but it was filled with deep persistence. This is my only way. The lightning tribulation was about to descend. She had to immediately break through to become a rank 7 warrior. As she spoke, she absorbed all the surrounding golden origin power. At the same time, she also absorbed the ball of divine power that had shrunk to the size of a longan in the heavenly square cauldron. All the energy rushed into the small water droplet floating in her dantian. Bang! 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 The surging power was like a surging river, gushing down in an instant. The Yuan Meridian in Chu Luiyue's body also exploded one after another. Her vision turned black. The clothes on her body were tattered, and there were bloody wounds everywhere. She was completely covered in blood. The last golden star disappeared. All the brilliant light quickly dimmed. Between heaven and earth it was dark. Only the lightning tribulation in the clouds lit up half the sky. It flickered and swam quickly. It was wrapped in a shocking pressure, as if it was ready to descend and destroy the world at any time. She actually forcefully swallowed all this energy, all of it. Look, she seems to be bleeding. She's crazy. She's really seeking her own death. At this moment, everyone could finally see the situation at the top of the mountain. The girl in red sat quietly. There was a black shield in front of her, and a dragon abyss sword lying beside her. Her black hair hung down. It was silent. However, around her and under her feet, the color of blood continued to spread. Looking at this situation, one would almost think that she was dead at first glance. Chu Liyue's eyes were tightly shut. The water droplet in her dantian spun quickly. It swallowed all the origin power, and that ball of divine power, and converted them into its own energy. The Yuan meridian in Chu Liyue's body was still shattering. Under the impact of this terrifying energy, the lustrous and tough Yuan meridian broke one after another. However, Chu Liyue could no longer care about that at this moment. She used all her strength to gather all this energy. Then she charged toward the water droplet. Whoosh! It was like waves crashing heavily on a reef. Countless waves were created. A few patterns on the water droplet also started to vibrate violently. Boom, boom, boom. At this moment, the lightning tribulation in the sky finally descended. Chu Liyue's figure was instantly enveloped by it. Chapter 997. 6 lightning tribulations struck down at the same time. It was a powerful attack. It was terrifying. The moment the dazzling light engulfed Chu Liyue, a loud sound came from the main peak. Then, under the horrified gazes of the crowd, the towering and precipitous main peak was suddenly split apart from the middle. Half of the cliff collapsed instantly. Rumble. The sound was deafening, and dust rose everywhere. Retreat. The people who had been standing nearby quickly retreated. The power of the 6 lightning tribulations was immeasurable, and ordinary people could not resist at all. The only way out was to retreat. Jun Jiuqing wanted to make a move, but he was one step too late. The lightning tribulations descended, and a powerful force came crashing down. He felt a tightness in his chest, and then he saw the cracks on the top of the mountain spreading rapidly. The moment the cliff collapsed, he tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and quickly flew up. Just as he was about to move forward, the terrifying force of the lightning tribulations swept over him. His pupils shrank, and he immediately retreated. Although he was extremely fast, he was still affected by the force. His body shook, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. After flying for a long distance, he barely managed to stabilize himself. He immediately looked up, and saw that the remaining half of the mountain had been completely enveloped by several silver lightning tribulations. The slender and straight figure had completely disappeared, and could not be seen. Jiuqing! Suddenly a shout could be heard. Jun Jiuqing's expression changed. This voice, it was his father's voice. He suddenly turned around, and saw that outside the barrier in the distance, Jun Qiji was floating in midair with a stern expression. The lightning tribulations have descended. Take everyone away from the ancient Phoenix Mountain immediately. Seal the barrier. Jun Qiji did not make this decision willfully. In fact, when he saw the 6 lightning tribulations appear at the same time, he already had a faint sense of uneasiness in his heart. But at that time, he still held on to the last bit of hope. He thought that it would not be too late to think about this after Jun Jiuqing took back the endless force and divine power. But who would have thought that Shang Guanyu would be so crazy and directly devour all the power? Such an action could be called crazy. She wanted to die. But Jun Qiji did not want her to drag everyone else down with her. Therefore, when he saw that the lightning tribulation had arrived, and was already wreaking havoc, Jun Qiji made a prompt decision, and immediately summoned Jun Jiuqing and the others to leave the ancient Phoenix Mountain. Upon hearing this order, Jun Jiuqing subconsciously frowned, and was about to refuse. Father, it doesn't seem right to leave ancient Phoenix Mountain right now. Boom! Boom! Before he could finish his sentence, the aftershocks of the lightning tribulation swept out in all directions. The peaks of the surrounding mountains were all shaved off. The mountain also collapsed. Countless rocks tumbled down. Amidst the chaos, there were some screams. Obviously, the power of these lightning tribulations had already spread out. Even those who had already begun to evacuate were more or less affected. It was a mess. Jun Qiji glanced at him and said coldly, "You've already caused such a ruckus, yet you're still not evacuating? Are you planning to have everyone stay here forever?" Jun Jiuqing was a stage 9 warrior, so he might be able to hold on for a while longer. However, the others here did not have the strength to do so. If they stayed any longer, they would only be in greater danger. That's right. The energy in ancient Phoenix Mountain is chaotic now. We can't stay any longer. Gong Sunshao also flew up and stood beside Jun Qiji, his face tense. He did not want the people from his dynasty to die here for no reason. With the arrival of 3 elements as one, the endless force and divine power, were all occupied by Sheng Guanyu. What was the point of the others staying here? They could only be forced to go through this tribulation together. Jun Qiji put his hands behind his back and looked at Jun Jiuqing with a dark expression. 9 ministers, other than you, the top geniuses from the other dynasties are still inside. If anything happens to them, can you bear the responsibility? Even if the Dark North dynasty had the highest status here, they could not bear such a heavy responsibility. This was the only and best way to deal with the current situation. Jun Jiuqing slowly clenched his fists in his sleeves. His eyes were filled with bitterness. If he left now, she would be the only one left. 9 ministers, why are you still hesitating? Jun Qiji stared at him, as if he had seen through everything. There was a hint of coldness and warning in his eyes. Don't forget your identity. Previously, he had vaguely guessed that the 9 ministers might have some feelings for Sheng Guanyu. However, from the looks of it now, these thoughts were much deeper than what he had expected. This made Jun Qiji vigilant. Jun Jiuqing was Prince Baiming, and the only future emperor of Dark North Dynasty. It was fine for him to like a woman, but if this love exceeded a certain limit, it would not be good. In the beginning, Jun Jiuqing could have taken action directly and not given Sheng Guanyu any chance. However, he did not do so. Instead, he indulged in Sheng Guanyu step by step and allowed it to reach its current state. The endless force that Taizu had deliberately left behind and accumulated for thousands of years, as well as the vital divine power, should have been his. But now it was all taken away by another person. This made Jun Qiji very uneasy. He looked around and could no longer see the figure on the damaged main peak. Perhaps her death would be the best ending for her. At this moment, a figure rushed over. It was Qing Dai. She was clearly injured and covered in blood. She bit her lips and bowed to Jun Jiuqing from afar. "Your Highness, many people below can't hold on any longer." Jun Jiuqing narrowed his eyes and lowered his gaze as he quickly scanned the area. In fact, even if Qing Dai did not say this, he could roughly guess the situation. The power contained within the lightning tribulation was simply too terrifying. Not only did it affect the main peak, but even the surrounding peaks were affected as well. However, by standing out like this, she was undoubtedly giving him another push. As expected, Jun Qiji urged again. "Jiuqing." Needless to say, this cold voice that was filled with warning had already explained everything. Jun Jiuqing looked at Qing Dai meaningfully. Qing Dai suddenly felt guilty and hurriedly lowered her head, not daring to look at him again. The look in His Highness' eyes just now. She had never seen His Highness look at her like that before. Qing Dai's heart was filled with anxiety, fear, and a trace of unwillingness. His Majesty and the others had already requested to evacuate. Naturally, they had to act immediately. Could it be that so many people were going to die together because of Sheng Guanyu? "I understand." After a short stalemate, Jun Jiuqing finally spoke. "Everyone leave ancient Phoenix Mountain immediately. In 15 minutes, the barrier of ancient Phoenix Mountain will be officially closed." His hoarse and low voice quickly reached everyone's ears. Then he waved his sleeve, and a long green bridge appeared in midair. The end of the long bridge was connected to the exit of the barrier. Soon, figures appeared from all over the place. They jumped onto the long bridge and headed straight for the exit. Chapter 998. Facing such a dangerous situation, how could they care about anything else? They had to leave this place first and protect their own lives first. Therefore, everyone inside the ancient Phoenix Mountains barrier left quickly without any hesitation. The elders guarding the barrier outside had clearly realized that something was wrong and tried their best to tear a hole in the barrier. Perhaps because of the chaos inside, the colorful barrier's power seemed to have been reduced by a lot. This undoubtedly made the elders feel much more relaxed. However, no one dared to relax in such a situation. Who knew how terrifying the power of the lightning tribulation was? After all, no one had seen anyone summon the ninth soul-gazing tribulation. Moreover, it was 6 at once. Elder Hua Qian looked at the violent power of the lightning tribulation and the collapsing mountain with a grave expression. Ancient Phoenix Mountain, I'm afraid it's going to be destroyed. Elder Chun Ku and the others didn't care at all whether the ancient Phoenix Mountain would be destroyed or not. What they cared about was the safety of Chu Luyue and the others. Jian Fengqi and the others might still have a chance to return, but Her Majesty, she was now completely enveloped by the power of the lightning tribulation, so I'll go in and bring her back. Elder Su Jin couldn't hold back and was about to move out. However, just as she reached the opening of the barrier and was about to enter, a violent power surged out from within. Elder Su Jin was caught off guard and was pushed back a few steps. Xiao Ran immediately went forward and supported her with a worried expression. Jin, are you alright? Elder Su Jin didn't care about that and pointed inside. You are still inside. What should they do? Xiao Ran pursed his lips. You're a mystic cultivator, so you'll be at a disadvantage if you go in. It's better for you to stay here. I'm a martial artist, so it's better for me to go. With that, he moved and was about to go in. No one needs to go. Sunny suddenly spoke. Everyone looked at him and saw that his expression was still calm, without any hint of nervousness. This is her soul-gazing tribulation, so she can only go through it herself. No one else can help her. Sun Yi's words weren't without reason. Even if other people went over and helped her block some of the power, she still had to win this round. Then, are we just going to watch and do nothing? Elder Su Jin paced back and forth anxiously. If she was at her peak in the past, she might have been able to survive. But now, on one hand, Chu Luyue was only at the peak of the 6th stage. On the other hand, she had already been badly injured by the boundless origin power and divine power. Under such circumstances, facing 6 lightning tribulations was simply a one-way trip. Sunny looked up and narrowed his eyes. After a moment of silence, he said, as long as she can break through to the 7th rank, it might not be impossible. More and more people left. In the end, only Mu Hongyu and the others remained where they were. What should we do? Luyu hasn't made any moves yet. Mu Hongyu's heart was in her throat, and she felt uneasy. If not for the fact that Dumpling was still by their side, she would have really thought that something had happened to Chu Luyue. Even so, they still couldn't completely eliminate their worries. That kind of power, even Jun Jiuqing couldn't withstand it, let alone her? The few of them were conflicted. They all looked at Jian Fengqi, waiting for him to make a decision. How could Jian Fengqi not be hesitant? If they didn't wait, they wouldn't be able to get over it. If they weren't careful, they would have to die here. Boom! A silver lightning tribulation struck. The mountain peak they were on also began to collapse. Screech! Dumpling suddenly let out a clear cry. She was urging them to leave. Jian Fengqi knitted his brows and turned around to look. Chu Luyue's figure was still nowhere to be seen. He gritted his teeth. Let's go. Mu Hongyu originally didn't agree, but she was worried that she would be a burden to Chu Luyue if she stayed here. Seeing that Dumpling had already made up her mind to send them out, she took a few deep breaths and finally jumped onto Dumpling's back. The few of them followed one after another. Dumpling's wings flapped and she quickly flew up towards the exit. Mu Hongyu looked back reluctantly. Jian Fengqi also followed her gaze. He lowered his eyes and saw that her fists were clenched so tightly that her knuckles were white. His heart skipped a beat. He held her hand. Don't worry. Since Dumpling wants to take us away, it means that she's definitely fine. Mu Hongyu nodded vigorously. The group quickly flew out. Jun Jiuqing followed closely behind, and was the last to leave. Elder Hua Qian gave the order. Ancient Phoenix Mountain Pass. The gorgeous colorful barrier closed with a bang. Except for Chu Luyue. Everyone had already come out. Most of them were injured. At this time, they looked at the half of the cliff that was barely standing with lingering fear. Tan Taichen looked around, and his heart gradually sank. Nothing. Not a single person. As expected, the 5 people from Taiyu dynasty were all dead. The blood in his body seemed to have frozen. His whole body was cold, and his mind was blank. Even if he had expected it, the moment he personally verified it, he still staggered and almost fell. He slowly raised his head and looked at the dazzling light. Shang Guanyu. She deserved to die. After this battle, her soul would definitely scatter. Although he couldn't take revenge personally, it was still a consolation to get this result. However, at this moment, there was a sudden exclamation from the crowd. What's that? Tan Taichen's heart skipped a beat, and he quickly looked over. He saw a slender and straight figure suddenly appear in the dazzling light. It was Chu Luyue. She broke through to the 7th rank. A digression. I thank you for Lizzie's new cover. It's so big. Chapter 999. The lightning tribulation shone brightly, almost illuminating half of the sky. On the steep mountain peak, the woman stood with her head held high, her clothes fluttering in the wind. There was a palm-sized golden peach blossom above her head. The terrifying power of the lightning tribulation poured down, but when it met the golden peach blossom, it seemed to be afraid and flowed to the side. With it as the center, Chu Luyue held up a small sky. What is that? Jun Qiji and the others were shocked when they saw this scene. What kind of power could make the lightning tribulation feel fear? Yet, such a small golden peach blossom was able to easily block all of the pressure from the outside. Jun Jiuqing narrowed his eyes dangerously, and a faint trace of disgust appeared in his eyes. It's really haunting me. Chu Luyue looked up and stared at the golden peach blossom. When the 6 lightning tribulations fell together, she was at the critical moment of breaking through to become a rank 7 warrior. Thanks to this thing, it helped her block it for a moment, and she won the last bit of time to successfully break through. That familiar feeling grew stronger and stronger, and something seemed to be about to come out from the bottom of her heart. Chu Luyue stood quietly on the spot, but an earth-shattering change was happening in her body. The invisible barrier had already shattered, and in her dantian, a turbulent force swept through. On the water droplet, the 7th pattern was slowly emerging. What was different from the previous 6 lines was that the color of this line was gorgeous and incomparably bright. The moment Chu Luyue saw it, she instantly held her breath. This was the trace left behind by devouring the divine power of Taizu of the northern underworld. Even in her previous life, she had not reached such a stage. To step into the rank 7 warrior with the help of a divine power. When the gorgeous pattern was officially outlined, a drop of water suddenly flew out from the water droplet. That drop of water was suffused with colorful phosphorescence, and it was very moving. Then, it transformed into thousands of tiny water droplets and flew towards Chu Luyue's limbs and bones. After being washed by the terrifying power, the Yuan meridian in Chu Luyue's body was severely damaged, and it was like dry and chapped ground, covered in ravines. When those water droplets flew over, it was as if spring had returned to the earth. Chu Luyue's damaged Yuan meridian began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. Furthermore, his Yuan meridian was clearly wider, tougher, and more lustrous than before. Chu Luyue's heart suddenly trembled violently when he saw the faint glow on the newly repaired Yuan meridian. Then, under her incredulous gaze, these water droplets scattered and rapidly repaired all the Yuan meridians in her body. Chu Luyue's aura rose again. The pressure was overwhelming. That was the unique aura of the Tianjing Yuan meridian. At the same time, Chu Luyue's broken Yuan meridian was not only repaired by the power of the water droplet, but it was also directly transformed into the Tianjing Yuan meridian. In an instant, his entire body felt relaxed, as if the mountains were high and the rivers were wide. Vigorous origin power surged out of his dantian, and poured into his yuan meridian that had expanded by several times. It was incomparably smooth. Chu Luiyue felt as if something was stirring in his chest. This feeling was something that he had not felt for a long time. She had never thought that she would have the chance to regain the Tianjing Yuan meridian in this life. She subconsciously reached out her hand, but the moment the golden peach blossom touched her hand, it quietly dissipated. At the same time, the black pyramid in her dantian suddenly moved. Immediately, a crack clearly appeared on top of it. Faint light shone from within, as if thousands of worlds were hidden within. That familiar feeling became even more intense. At this moment, Chu Luiyue was almost certain that what was hidden inside was indeed her soul. This time, the crack on the black pyramid was not repaired, but it did not continue to expand either. Chu Luiyue could feel a familiar aura inside, but she was unable to summon it out. She was very clear that as long as this black pyramid was completely opened, and she found the soul that belonged to her, then the lost memory would definitely return. She was only one step away from the truth, but this step was no different from a huge chasm that was difficult to cross. Rumble. Just as Chu Luiyue was thinking about this black pyramid, the numerous lightning tribulations above her head made a loud noise again and struck towards her. Without the protection of the golden peach blossom, Chu Luiyue would have to face this extremely terrifying pressure directly. The next moment, with a thought, the long yuan sword quickly flew back to her hand. Everyone turned to look at him. The world was dark, and the surrounding mountains had been razed to the ground. It was a complete mess. Only the main peak still stood upright with half of the steep cliff. The woman in red had a slender figure, but she stood straight. Her shoulders were thin and weak, but they seemed to be able to hold up the sky. The wind was raging, and her hair was fluttering. Swoosh! She tiptoed, and her body flew up instantly like a sharp arrow. She was actually going to face the numerous lightning tribulations head-on. Seeing this scene, everyone outside the boundary was dumbfounded. She actually chose to face it head-on. What exactly is she thinking? Even if she has broken through to become a stage 7 warrior, facing 6 lightning tribulations, she will definitely lose. Oh my god. How did she successfully break through in that situation just now? I don't dare to say anything else, but Shang Guanyu's ability and luck are really incomparable to ordinary people. The crowd discussed spiritedly. They all felt that the things that had happened to that woman during this period of time were simply too bizarre. First, she split open the ancient Phoenix Mountains boundary alone. Then, she went against the flow and climbed to the top of the main peak. After that, she directly snatched the endless force and divine power that originally belonged to Jun Jiuqing. Just when everyone thought that she would definitely die after summoning 9 divinity tribulations, she actually successfully broke through to become a stage 7 warrior under such circumstances. And now she was going to fight against the 6 lightning tribulations. Any one of these things was enough to shake people's hearts, and she actually did all of them. At this moment, Chu Luiyue had no other thoughts. In her eyes and heart, there was only one goal: to win this divinity tribulation. 1 tribulation was a tribulation, 6 tribulations was also a tribulation. Since they appeared together then, she would just solve them together. The sharp and cold aura kept attacking her, and she felt a sharp pain on her face and body. However, this little bit of pain was nothing to Chu Luiyue. She mobilized the force in her body. It was continuously injected into the long yuan sword. On the simple and imposing black sword body, the aura rose crazily. The groove in the middle was also filled with the silver Tianlei's power. Chu Luiyue's mind moved, and ripples appeared on the water droplet. Magnificent ripples spread out in all directions. Buzz! The sword hummed. Chu Luiyue slashed down. In an instant, the world lost its color. Break for me. Chapter 1000. Boom. The 2 forces collided with each other. Following the deafening sound, a violent and terrifying energy wave began to spread in all directions. It was unstoppable. The mountain range that had already been ravaged beyond recognition was completely flattened by this force. The hard mountain rocks silently turned into powder and scattered in the air. The ground cracked and was filled with ravines. Whoosh! Several lightning tribulations converged and formed a large silver ball of light. Suddenly, a hole was torn open. Then, everyone saw a figure rising up against the sky. She was extremely fast and slashed with her sword. In the blink of an eye, everyone realized that the hole had spread rapidly. She had actually cut the lightning tribulations in half. She had carved out a bloody path. The intense energy battle left countless wounds on Chu Liyue's body. Blood kept dripping from her body, but she didn't care about it. The crackling power of the lightning tribulations rapidly approached from all directions. Following that opening, it formed a ring shape and surrounded Chu Liyue in the middle. Chu Liyue surveyed her surroundings, and her lips curved up into a cold smile. You want to besiege me? That depends on whether I'm willing or not. She shook her arm, and two flames instantly surged out from her palms. One was red, and the other was transparent. The two flames intertwined and quickly enveloped the long yuan sword. Several lightning tribulations closed in. Chu Liyue's eyes flashed with a crazy desire to fight. Just in time. Before she finished speaking, she had already attacked. The incomparably sharp blade pierced through the approaching lightning tribulation energy. Everywhere it passed, flames began to burn wildly. The lightning tribulations that were arrogant before seemed to have sensed danger and began to fight fiercely. However, the more they fought, the fiercer the flames burned and burned them all to ashes. Shangguan Yu's flames can actually fight against the lightning tribulations? Gongsun Xiao, who was far away, was shocked. No, her flames clearly devoured all the energy. Ning Yuan had also appeared in midair. He looked ahead and spoke in a low voice. Deep in his eyes, which had always been calm, there seemed to be a storm brewing. When he saw that Shangguan Yu had successfully broken through to become a stage 7 warrior under such circumstances, he had already predicted that she would win this battle. However, he didn't expect Shangguan Yu's combat power to be even more shocking than he had expected. This was her real trump card. The surrounding people were all stunned and speechless. Everything that had happened before their eyes had already exceeded their knowledge. Every scene was like a miracle. The next moment, Chu Liyue turned her waist, and the long yuan sword, which was wrapped in a terrifying fire, had already ignited all the lightning around her. Boom! The flames burned fiercely. A sea of fire tribulations. Several bolts of tribulation lightning were quickly devoured. Not long after, there was only a sea of fire that was still burning fiercely in the sky. In the next moment, a figure. Everything in the world seemed to have lost its color at this moment. Only the woman in the red dress with her black hair dancing in the wind, and the black sword in her hand, was like a god of war descending. She was like a god of death. She was covered in wounds, and her face was covered in blood. However, her eyes were cold and resolute. Her black jade-like eyes seemed to have gathered all the light in the world. They were dazzling. They were more precious than the treasures in the world. Under the brilliant light of the fire, it was as if she had been reborn. Her figure moved and landed lightly on the ground. The moment her feet touched the top of the main peak, boom! The mountain collapsed. The last remaining half of the cliff was also completely destroyed. She still stood there, unmoving like a mountain. With a flick of her wrist, the flames behind her rushed back into her body. Then, she raised her eyes and looked over. They were clearly far away, and there was clearly a barrier blocking them. However, Jun Qiji and the others were shocked. This aura, this pressure. Was she really just a stage 7 warrior? Chu Liyue raised her hand and slashed down with her sword. Qi. The ancient Phoenix Mountains barrier was instantly torn apart. Chu Liyue's figure moved, and she quickly flew out. Until Chu Liyue stepped out of the barrier, no one had realized what had happened. Looking at the woman who seemed to have appeared in front of them in the blink of an eye, countless people widened their eyes in shock, their faces filled with disbelief. In the dead silence, Sini took the lead and walked over. He sized up Chu Liyue without batting an eyelid. Then the corners of his lips curled up slightly. His usually indifferent eyes were filled with undisguised gratification and joy. He placed one hand on his left chest and bowed slightly. "Welcome back, Your Majesty." Chu Liyue also smiled. Sini's eyesight had always been good. He must have seen that she had recovered her Tianjing Yuan meridian. After her rebirth, Her only regret was that she had lost her Tianjing Yuan meridian. And now, this regret had finally been made up for. Everything could be considered perfect. Elder Chen Ku and the others finally came back to their senses. They could not hide their excitement. Not only did she come out alive, but she had also successfully broken through and become a stage 7 warrior. More importantly, she had withstood 9 lightning tribulations. Her future was bound to be limitless. Mu Hongyu and the others also rushed over. If not for her last bit of rationality, Mu Hongyu would have pounced over. Lu Yu, you're so amazing. I knew you would succeed. Although her face was filled with ecstasy, the corners of her eyes were red. It was obvious that she had cried. Chu Liyue comforted her with a smile. Don't worry. Aren't I fine now? How is it just fine? It was a huge gain. Everyone was originally filled with lofty aspirations, wanting to compete for supremacy within the ancient Phoenix Mountain. But in the end, the biggest winner was Chu Liyue, who had no intention of entering at all. Who wouldn't be envious? Jian Fengqi opened his bone fan and raised his brows. You're really tough. Although he said that, there was a smile at the corners of his eyes. It could be seen that he was truly happy for Chu Liyue. Chu Liyue readily accepted his advice. Thank you for the compliment. Jian Fengqi finally couldn't help but laugh. She had changed her physical body, but her temperament hadn't changed at all. In short, everyone in the Tianling dynasty was happy and lively, but the people from the other families weren't in such a good mood. Shangguanyu. A low and cold voice sounded. Chu Liyue looked up slightly. It was Tan Taichen. His face was much more haggard and gloomy than before, and there seemed to be a coldness in his eyes that couldn't be erased. Now you're very proud? As soon as he finished speaking, the surroundings suddenly quieted down. Everyone realized that something was wrong and looked over. His voice was filled with undisguised deep resentment. You killed my beloved daughter, and the rest of the people from the Taiyu dynasty. How should you apologize? Digression. Previously, when the first book was about 700,000 words per exhaustion period, the second book was about 1 million words. Now it was close to 2 million, and it was finally here. Every word was extremely difficult to write. I hope to get through this period as soon as possible. Try to update at 6 o'clock in the afternoon. Chapter 1001. As soon as he said that, the place became even more silent. Many people had already noticed that something was amiss. After Jun Jiuqing ordered everyone to leave the ancient Phoenix Mountain, the people from the other empires came out one after another. However, the people from the Taiyu Empire did not appear until the barrier was closed. None of the 5 people were seen. At that time, everyone had already guessed that something might have happened to the people from the Taiyu Empire. At this moment, when they heard his question, they were certain that the 5 of them had indeed been completely annihilated. This time, the people who were qualified to enter the ancient Phoenix Mountain with Tan Taichen were the top geniuses of the Taiyu Empire. Losing one of them was already a pity. Moreover, there were 5 of them. Not to mention that one of them was Tan Taichen's beloved daughter, Tantai Ruoli. No wonder Tan Taichen's condition was very strange a few days ago. It turns out that something like this happened. It seems like he had already guessed this at that time, right? How terrifying. All 5 of them are dead. But there are so many people in the ancient Phoenix Mountain. How could he be so sure that it was Shangguanyu who did it? Since he's so sure, he must have evidence, right? Otherwise, why would he point it out so publicly? If it was really Shangguanyu who did it, then there's going to be a good show today. Some people discussed in low voices. They were shocked and doubtful, and each had their own opinions. Chu Liyue was stunned and seemed to be surprised. Senior Tantai, why do you say that? When did I kill the people from the Taiyu Empire? Why don't I know about it? As she spoke, she looked around as if she was looking for the whereabouts of those people. Didn't everyone come out earlier? Why? Aren't they here? Don't put on an act. Tan Taichen was so angry that he laughed. You know very well whether it was you who did it or not. You forcefully tore open the barrier of the ancient Phoenix Mountain. Not long after they entered, they all died. If it wasn't you, how could it be so coincidental? Oh, you're talking about this. Chu Liyue thought for a moment. Her lips slowly curled into an extremely cold smile as she spoke word by word. That's because after I arrived, I happened to see them chasing after the people from the Tianling dynasty. Tan Taichen's expression suddenly stiffened. I knew that they were in danger. I was worried, so I chose to forcefully break through the barrier. After rushing over, he saw Snapper and the other two being surrounded by Tantai Ruoli's group of 5. If I hadn't arrived in time, the 3 of them would have died there. I wonder how Hong Yu and the rest defended them to the point that they want to kill them all. Everyone had entered the ancient Phoenix Mountain with the intention of obtaining the 3 essences, as one overhead. It was truly strange for them to be so eager to kill others. Chu Liyue spoke slowly, but every word was like a nail that nailed Tantai Chun to the ground. He couldn't move. His gaze was evasive as he shouted angrily, "Who knows what's going on? Ruoli and the others have always treated people kindly. They would never do something like this. Even if they fought, it must be your people who did something wrong first. Otherwise, why would they kill the people from the Tianling dynasty?" Yes, Tianling has always followed the rules. Shang Guanyu and the others know that their strength can't be compared to the people from other dynasties, so they've always been cautious and honest. Thinking about it, it seems that I'm the only one who offended Taiyu before. Tan Taichen was a little embarrassed, so he interrupted Chu Liyue. This is just your side of the story. Ruoli and the others are dead now. Of course, you can say whatever you want. Even if I don't have enough evidence, since you admitted to fighting with them, you can't deny it. Unless you can prove your innocence, you'll still be blamed for this. Chu Liyue raised her eyebrows slightly and almost laughed out loud. Tan Taichen didn't have any evidence, but he directly accused her like this. Moreover, he wanted her to prove her innocence. Otherwise, he would put all the blame on her. What a bandit's logic. How could there be such logic in this world? Tantai Ruoli and the others left quickly after fighting with us. As for where they went after that, we don't know. After all, we're all busy improving our strength. We don't have the time to deal with people we don't like, said Chu Liyue lightly, and her voice was slightly cold. I've already given you the explanation you want. If you don't believe me, there's nothing we can do. But if you want to convict us without any evidence, then I'm sorry, but I won't play along. She didn't have the patience and interest to argue with them here. Tan Taichen was so angry that he couldn't say anything. He wanted to take out evidence, but he couldn't and didn't dare to. It wasn't easy for him to get that rune. It was divided into 5 parts and placed on each of the 5 people. Firstly, it was to allow them to find each other quickly after entering. Secondly, it was to ensure their safety. When they died in the end, the rune was obviously not complete. However, he could vaguely feel a scorching aura. It did seem like it was burned by some kind of flame. At first, he was just guessing. However, when he saw Shanghai Yu use the 2-colored flame, he was almost certain that it was her. Unfortunately, the time was too short, and he didn't get any more useful information. Most importantly, this bit of evidence could barely be considered as evidence, but he couldn't make it public. Otherwise, it would bring great trouble to himself and the entire Taiyu dynasty. Tan Taichen's heart felt like it was being pressed by a heavy stone, and he was extremely depressed. Chu Liyue carefully looked at Tan Taichen's face and took in his expression. It seemed that Tan Taichen had some concerns, and what he was worried about was obviously the rune in the Black Demon Cave. As long as he dared to mention it, she would dare to question him on the spot. But obviously he didn't dare to. Even when his beloved daughter died, he was filled with resentment and hatred, but he still didn't dare to mention the Black Demon Cave. However, how could Tan Taichen really let it go? He looked around and said in a deep voice, "Good. Since you said that they left after fighting with you, then I'll ask, after the 6th day of the ancient Phoenix Mountain, who saw the people of Taiyu dynasty?" Everyone looked at each other. After a short silence, a few people murmured in a low voice, "After the 6th day, I don't think I saw them." Yes. Later, I was quite curious that they didn't go to the main peak of the ancient Phoenix Mountain. Now that I think about it, did something happen at that time? It's not impossible, Tan Taichen sneered. Sheng Guanyu, did you hear that? The few of you are clearly the last few people to have seen them. If it wasn't you who did it, then who? Chapter 1002. Chu Liyue's expression was calm as she smiled faintly. It's not us. Of course, there could be other reasons. Ancient Phoenix Mountain is extremely dangerous. Who knows if they encountered some accident and couldn't escape, so they all died. After all, Tantai Ruoli's group of 5 is not weak. To be able to kill them together. In Ancient Phoenix Mountain, there aren't many people who can do it, right? She raised her chin. Even our people have encountered many dangers, and only managed to escape with their lives after much difficulty. As a matter of fact, Xiaozhou was still unconscious. Everyone followed her line of sight. A young man with short blonde hair was curled up on the ground motionless. He had been like this since they came out, and it seemed that he had been unconscious for a long time. Chu Liyue's words were not without reason. Even their own people had become like this. Perhaps Tantai Ruoli and the others were indeed. Tan Taichen clenched his fists, and the veins on his forehead bulged. This Sheng Guanyu was really sharp-tongued. Sophistry. It must be because Ruoli offended you before, so you killed her so ruthlessly. Tan Taichen stretched out his hand and pointed at Chu Liyue. You are really vicious. She's not such a person. At this moment a clear voice was heard. Everyone looked over and found that it was a young man from the Xian dynasty who had spoken. Sensing the gazes of the crowd, his fair and clean face immediately turned red. But he still firmly said, that's right. She saved me when she went up the mountain. I believe she's not such a person. Jinyuan. Gongsun Xiao frowned and looked at him disapprovingly. Why was he adding to the chaos at this time? Even if the Tianling dynasty and the Taiyu dynasty were completely at odds with each other, and even fought, it had nothing to do with them. Besides, Tan Taichen had suffered a heavy loss this time and was greatly affected. Who knew what he would do? Why did he have to drag her into this mess for no reason? Gongsun Jinyuan pursed his lips. Of course, he knew that he shouldn't have opened his mouth. Moreover, the battle between the two sides was intense. Even if he was a prince of the Xian dynasty, he could not get a word in edgewise. But he still couldn't hold it in. Chu Liyue smiled at him and nodded in acknowledgement. Back then, she had only helped him out of convenience. She didn't expect that Zhang Xian would speak up for her. He was much more sincere than that old fox, Gongsun Xiao. Chu Liyue looked at Tan Taichen. Emperor Huairan, this consort is giving each other face by calling you senior. But if you don't want this face, then I won't show you any mercy. Tan Taichen sneered. Who do you think cares about your face? If you don't give me an explanation, I, Taiyu, will not let this matter rest. He was determined to fight to the end. Chu Liyue narrowed his eyes slightly. She still had a lot of things to do. How could she be in the mood to waste time with Tan Taichen? I can testify. Jun Jiuqing suddenly opened his mouth. At that time, the people of the Taiyu dynasty did indeed fight with them and left directly. As for what happened after that, no one knows. Tan Taichen's fierce expression suddenly froze. He could ignore others who spoke up for him. But Jun Jiuqing was different. If even he said so, then, whether it was true or not, he could no longer openly cause trouble for the Tianling dynasty. Jiuqing, is what you said true? Jun Qiji looked at him meaningfully. Jun Jiuqing's lips curled slightly, but his eyes were calm and indifferent. Of course, what I said is true. Everyone looked at each other. At this time, everyone could see that Jun Jiuqing was determined to speak up for the Tianling dynasty. If he said it was true, then it was true. Tan Taichen was completely speechless. His eyes wandered back and forth between them, and then he sneered. Good. Previously, Jun Jiuqing had always treated Sheng Guanyu differently, and with everything that happened on ancient Phoenix Mountain, what else could he not see? He looked deeply at Chu Liyue, waved his sleeves fiercely and turned to leave. After Tan Taichen left, the scene fell into a strange silence. In fact, the outcome of this dispute had yet to be determined. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that Tan Taichen would definitely not let it go. He had lost his beloved daughter and several top geniuses. No one could say for sure what he would do. Chu Liyue did not seem to care. He turned to thank Jun Jiuqing and Gongsun Jinyuan. Then, he bowed solemnly to Jun Qiji to express his apology. After all, he had snatched something left behind by the Taizu, so he had to show his sincerity. Jun Qiji's chest felt tight, and he was extremely speechless. He had always thought that the biggest beneficiary of this opening of ancient Phoenix Mountain would definitely be Jun Jiuqing. Therefore, he had very generously invited people from the other great empires. From the beginning, he only wanted to borrow the strength of these people to open the barrier of ancient Phoenix Mountain. But how could he have thought that the end result would be like this? It would be strange if he found Chu Luiyue pleasing to the eye. If it were not for the fact that there were so many people present, he would not have been able to smile at all. Jun Jiuqing did not seem to care much about this matter, but his gaze was deep and unfathomable. In the end, Jun Qiji looked at the almost raised ancient Phoenix Mountain and sighed. He used the excuse that he was tired and took the lead to leave. That divine power had been taken away by Chu Luiyue. From now on, this ancient Phoenix Mountain was no longer special, and it was no longer their divine mountain. After Jun Qiji left, everyone returned one after another. The matter of ancient Phoenix Mountain could be considered to have come to an end. After the people of the great empires returned to the city, they began to plan their return. This time, other than the Taiyu dynasty, which had suffered heavy losses, the others seemed to be doing well overall. Although they did not inherit as much power as Chu Luiyue, most of them had more or less received a portion of the origin power, when 3 essences is 1. In the end, this trip was not in vain. When they returned to the side courtyard, it was already afternoon. After Chu Luiyue tidied up a little, she went to Chang Wanzhou's room. Dumpling had been waiting by the side. When she saw Chu Luiyue come in, she immediately flew over happily. "How is he?" Chu Luiyue asked as she walked over to take Chang Wanzhou's pulse. Dumpling shook her head, indicating that he was not doing well. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. She had checked him on the way here, and knew that this was a sign that the seal in his body was about to break. She had thought that after such a long time, his body would have improved a little. However, it did not. The 2 forces in his body had been pulling at each other, causing him to be unable to wake up. The young man's pale face was covered with a layer of frost. His body was trembling slightly, and the cold air around him was threatening. Chu Luiyue looked at him, and she was a little worried. She did not know how long this situation would last. At this moment, a pattern suddenly flashed between Chang Wanzhou's brows. Digression. Around 6:30 p.m. Chapter 1003. Knock knock. There was a knock on the door. Chu Luiyue turned around and saw Cin standing at the door. "Master, the riddle you gave me previously has been solved." Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat as she stood up and walked over. As she walked, she did not see the pattern on Chang Wanzhou's forehead. So fast. Cin smiled faintly and handed over a folded piece of paper. "The problem isn't that difficult. I solved it previously, but I didn't have the chance to give it to you, so it dragged on until now." Chu Luiyue took it, opened it and quickly read through it. Shock surfaced in her eyes. After a while, she looked up and smiled helplessly. "You're the only one who can say not difficult." After she returned from the East Palace, she had described the mechanism there to Cin. At that time, she had barely opened that checkpoint in a panic, but she wasn't proficient in it. She could tell that there were other mechanisms in the room, so she told Cin about them. Cin was the most proficient in these things. If he could solve it, it would undoubtedly save her a lot of trouble. However, at the beginning, she was only giving it a try and didn't expect him to be able to come up with an answer. After all, her ability in this aspect was far inferior to his. She could only describe it as much as possible, but she couldn't explain it. She didn't expect him to solve it so easily. She took a closer look at the pattern on the paper and sighed inwardly. Cin's ability in this aspect was really something that she couldn't catch up to no matter how hard she tried. "Actually, I haven't seen such an interesting thing in a long time, so it's a little more fun." Cin's smile deepened and his tone was sincere. "Just burn this thing after you're done reading it. If they were accidentally seen by others, it might cause some trouble. After all, It was a mechanism in Prince Biming's palace, so it was hard to explain if it was involved. Chu Luiyue nodded. A flame appeared on her fingertip, and the paper quickly burned to ashes. Sun Yi turned to look at Chang Wanzhou, who was still lying on the bed in the room. "You're here to see Chang Wanzhou? Is he getting better now?" Chu Luiyue shook his head. The two forces in his body are fighting against each other. It wouldn't be good for him to act rashly. So, he can only rely on himself this time. Sun Yi glanced at her, hesitating to speak. "What happened?" Chu Luiyue asked curiously. Sun Yi smiled and shook his head. "It's nothing. You've just broken through, so you still need to adjust. Let me take care of things here." Chu Luiyue thought about it and agreed. Sun Yi had always been the most reliable, and he was also powerful. He should be the most suitable candidate to stay here. She said a few more words before leaving. Sun Yi watched her leave, until her figure gradually disappeared. Only then did he turn around and enter the room. Walking to Chang Wanzhou's side, Sun Yi took a closer look, and discovered that there was a faint glow flickering between his brows. That pattern would appear from time to time. She probably didn't notice it just now, right? Sun Ding stared at it for a long time, his gaze deep. Chu Luiyue returned to her room, and began to adjust her breathing. She had suffered quite a few injuries previously, but after breaking through to rank 7, she had already recovered more than half of them. After crossing this crucial threshold, her strength in all aspects had increased tremendously. In addition, she had already recovered her Tianjing Yuan meridian, so she naturally had an advantage. Whether it was her cultivation speed, or the strength of her physical body, they had all increased significantly. Her dantian had already returned to normal. The water droplet floated quietly, and the 7 patterns were bright and dazzling. Vigorous force surged back and forth, and her entire body seemed to be filled with strength. It had been too long since she had such a feeling. Only when she reached rank 7 would she be considered to have officially stepped onto the path of the strong. After adjusting the aura in her body, she diverted some of her attention to look at the Black Pyramid. Now a crack had appeared on it, and a faint light was seeping out from within. Unfortunately, Chu Luiyue still couldn't touch the thing inside from the outside, unless he could completely decipher it. Chu Luiyue's thoughts became active. Now that she was a rank 7 warrior, and there was a divine power in her body, if she could make good use of this power, then maybe she could break the seal? Thinking of this, her eyes lit up, and she was a little restless. She did as she said. Chu Luiyue closed her eyes and held her breath. Then, she drew out a power from the water droplet. There was a faint gorgeous color on it, and it was the divine power. Then, she controlled the divine power, and sent it crashing towards the Black Pyramid. In the main hall, Rong Xiu was looking at the booklets. In front of him, Ming Yao and a few others were standing respectfully. "Your Highness, this is the preliminary list. The most outstanding women of the right age from each tribe are listed in it. Please take a look." Ming Yao bowed, and his tone was somewhat flattering. Even though he wasn't willing to let the people from other tribes participate, Rong Xiu had personally asked, so they naturally couldn't say anything. However, this didn't mean that he couldn't do it from other aspects. For example, on this booklet, there was actually a portrait of every woman. Among them, the beauty and ugliness were naturally a contest. Rong Xiu's expression was indifferent, and no emotions could be seen. At this moment, his expression suddenly changed, and his eyebrows furrowed. A trace of pain flashed across his noble and enchanting face. "Your Highness, what's wrong?" Ming Yao and the others felt that something was wrong, and immediately asked nervously. Rong Xiu waved his hand, and pinched the bridge of his nose. "It's nothing. It's just, I was hit by my wife." Chapter 1004. Rong Xiu casually picked up a pen, and left a few comments on the booklet. Then, he closed it, and threw it on a pile of unopened booklets. Obviously, he didn't intend to continue reading. That's all. Ming Yao was a little unwilling. "Your Highness, aren't you going to choose carefully?" The booklets below were the names and portraits of the women from each department. He had spent quite a bit of effort on quite a few of them. His Highness had never been close to women. He had tried to persuade him many times, but to no avail. This time, he had no choice but to agree to choose a concubine. According to His Highness's character, he shouldn't want to make a big fuss. So it was reasonable to say that a large number of them should be filtered out. As long as His Highness opened it, he would definitely cross off some of the women from the list. But he had only read 2 booklets, and he didn't want to read any more? Since they are chosen by each department, I am naturally relieved. Rongxiu didn't care much and said lightly, "But Your Highness, this way, isn't it a little too many people?" Ming Yao said uneasily, and wanted to persuade him again. Rongxiu raised his eyes slightly and smiled faintly. "The matter of choosing a concubine was originally proposed by you. This booklet was also presented by you. Now, you say it's a little too many?" Ming Yao choked. "Moreover, I am the son of Saint. Since we are going to choose a concubine this time, we naturally have to do it well. Could it be that you think that I don't have the qualifications? We don't dare." Ming Yao and the others knelt down and begged for mercy in panic. "Your Highness, we definitely don't have such intentions." Rongxiu looked at them indifferently, and didn't speak for a while. There was dead silence in the hall. The air seemed to be frozen, making people feel embarrassed and pressured. Ming Yao and the others broke out in cold sweat. After some time, Rongxiu finally spoke when the few of them couldn't take it anymore. "You can all leave." The few of them quickly thanked him as if they had been pardoned. Then they hurriedly turned and left. Just as they took a step, they heard a voice behind them. "Take these booklets with you." Their bodies stiffened. Ming Yao immediately turned around and walked forward with his back bent. This subordinate has been negligent and actually forgot about this. Replace all these booklets with new ones. Rongxiu's words made Ming Yao's actions pause. He raised his head to look at her in surprise. "Your Highness, you mean?" Rongxiu lifted his gaze slightly. His gaze was deep, as if he could easily see through people's hearts, and see through them completely. His thin lips curved slightly, but there was no trace of a smile in his eyes. "I remember that the second daughter of the Luoshan clan looks very different from the portrait. Which painter was in charge of this booklet? He should be stripped of his position, chased out, and replaced with someone who knew how to paint." His tone was very light, but it instantly made Ming Yao's heart tighten. His Highness knows. He knows everything. Ming Yao instantly felt as if his little thoughts had been dug out by someone and exposed under the sun. It was embarrassing and shameful. His lips were pale as he nodded stiffly. "Yes, yes." With that, he took the booklets and left in a sorry state. The remaining few people saw that the situation seemed to be wrong and hurriedly left. Rongxiu only leaned back when these people's figures completely disappeared from the main hall. He rubbed his eyebrows and slowly exhaled. However, his thin crimson lips could not help but curl up into a gentle and helpless arc. What a ruthless move. What do you think? What's going on with His Highness? Didn't he always oppose the concubine selection? Why did he not only agree to it this time, but also intend to make it a big deal? The heart of the son of Saint is unpredictable. Who can guess? Could it be that after being told off too many times, he got sick of it and decided to make it a big deal? If that's the case, it will save a lot of trouble in the future. It's not unreasonable to say that, but it's a pity. We wasted this time's preparation. Ming Yao, what do you think? After walking out of the main hall, they walked a distance away and walked to a remote area. They could not help but discuss. Ming Yao was in a daze until the people beside him called out to him a few times. I don't know. Ming Yao recalled Rongxiu's gaze that seemed to see through everything, and became more and more upset. His Highness's thoughts have always been hard to guess. What can I think? He had a faint feeling of uneasiness in his heart. He felt that things seemed to be out of control, and heading in an unknown direction. However, at this point, it was useless to say anything. They could only continue to do it. There's only slightly more than a month left. Everyone prepare yourselves. At that time, if there's any mistake, you'll have to bear the consequences. I still have something to do, so I'll take my leave first. Ming Yao said and hurriedly left. The remaining few people looked at each other. What's going on? His suggestion was rejected by His Highness, but he doesn't need to be angry at us. Don't bother about him. It took him a lot of effort to get that painter on the line. Now that he's dead, how can he be in a good mood? Humph. Who can't tell what he's thinking? Isn't it because he wants to send the Ming tribe's precious daughter in? Unfortunately, he didn't expect that His Highness would take this opportunity to let all the tribes choose the name list. Their precious daughter might not be able to get the top spot. For His Highness to be able to ascend to his current position, his thoughts and methods are not comparable to him. Forget it, let's go back and prepare ourselves. Regardless of whether we can be chosen or not, we can't lose face. At Rongxiu's side, preparations for the concubine selection were in full swing. At this moment, Chu Liyue obviously didn't know anything about it. She crossed her arms and gently tapped her chin with one hand. Her brows were tightly knitted, as if she was in deep thought. Why is there still no movement? She thought for a while and couldn't help but mutter softly. Logically speaking, if I use my divine power, I should be able to contend with it. She tried to use that divine power to break the seal on the Black Pyramid, but it didn't have any effect. It didn't move at all, as if it didn't receive any interference. Only that crack seemed to be a little bigger than before. Chu Liyue stared at it for a long time, before she could barely recognize it. It was obvious how difficult it was to deal with this thing. Chu Liyue had a headache. It seemed that with her current strength, it wasn't enough to pose any threat to the seal on the Black Pyramid. She knew that a part of her soul was trapped inside, but she could only watch from the outside. This feeling was really frustrating. Sigh. Chu Liyue sighed. After thinking for a while, she finally decided to give up. This attack had consumed a lot of her energy. If she continuously attacked like this, she was afraid that she would be half dead from exhaustion before she could break the seal. It seemed that she had to wait until she was stronger to have any hope of breaking the seal. But that first master said that this was his wife's item. What was the relationship between her and his wife that she wanted to preserve a part of her soul? Chapter 1005. Chu Liyue desperately wanted to know the answer to this question. Now, she could basically confirm that she did know the first master in the past. But for some reason, he had never mentioned it when they met before. Could it be because she had changed her identity? But now her true identity had been made public. According to the first master's methods, he must have already known. I wonder if he and she are enemies or friends. Chu Liyue thought of this and glanced at herself in the mirror. She was slightly stunned, then stood up and walked over. She carefully looked at the woman's face in the mirror. It seemed that there were some slight changes compared to before. It seemed to have grown. After all, this body was only in her teens. As time passed, it was normal for some changes to slowly occur. But this face seemed to be more and more similar to her old self. If in the past, her facial features and the expression between her eyebrows were 50% similar, now that she was in a trance, she was actually 70% similar. Chu Liyue rarely looked at herself in the mirror, and she didn't care much about her appearance. That was why he was startled when he took a closer look. Looking at her like this, in a daze, she even felt as if she had returned to her age a few years ago. Although it had only been a few years, she had experienced many things in between, and had even crossed the line between life and death. Naturally, she felt that it had been a long time. Chu Liyue touched her face, and a thought suddenly appeared in her mind. I wonder, will this face grow up to be the same as before in the future? As soon as this thought appeared, she subconsciously suppressed it. How is that possible? Even twins might not be exactly the same, let alone two completely different people. I'm probably thinking too much. Chu Liyue sat quietly for a while. Night fell, and the bright moon hung high in the sky. It was quiet inside and outside the room. She stood up, changed into a black robe, covered her face, and quietly left the courtyard under the cover of the night. Chu Liyue came to the palace again. When she arrived outside the palace walls, Chu Liyue could clearly feel that the security here was much tighter than before. Clearly, the last time she had barged in, the people in the palace had become vigilant. However, this was not a big problem for Chu Liyue. Now that she was a rank 7 warrior, her strength was enough to deal with most of the people here. Thus, after choosing a location, Chu Luyue opened the enchantment of the palace again. Due to the fact that his cultivation had increased by quite a bit, it was much easier for him to open the barrier now. Not long after, the enchantment opened and Chu Luyue leaped into it, heading straight for the Eastern Palace. Crown Prince's Eastern Palace study room. The courtyard was heavily guarded, and the doors and windows of the study were tightly shut. In the room, Jun Jiuqing was standing in front of the bookshelf, looking at the marks left on it. Shang Binghe knelt behind him. This subordinate did not keep a tight watch and allowed someone to sneak in. This subordinate deserves 1,000 deaths. Please punish me, Your Highness. When he realized that something was wrong that day, he immediately sent people to investigate. Unfortunately, the other party was already prepared and disappeared. He secretly searched the city several times, but couldn't find anyone. It was obvious that he didn't use his true identity from the beginning, so there was no way to investigate. The trail was cut short here. Although Shang Binghe had racked his brains to think of a way, he still couldn't find anything. The only thing he could do was to strengthen the guards here and admit his guilt. You are indeed at fault. Jun Jiuqing retracted his gaze, turned around, and looked down at Shang Binghe. Leave no one related to this matter alive. Shang Binghe was shocked and suddenly raised his head. You mean? Although the news didn't spread, this matter shouldn't have been known by so many people. Jun Jiuqing's expression was indifferent, and his tone was indifferent. Only the faint blood-red color in his eyes vaguely carried a chilling, killing intent. Shang Binghe immediately lowered his head. Yes, His Highness's words meant that everyone who had stayed here that day couldn't be left alive. Originally, you should also apologize with your death, but I still have some use for you, so this time, I won't take your life. You can go down and receive 100 lashes later. These 100 lashes were not given by ordinary guards, but by Jun Jiuqing's trusted subordinates. Their strength was stronger than Shang Binghe's. Therefore this punishment was severe. After the punishment, he would lose half of his life. But Shang Binghe was already very lucky to be able to keep his life, so he quickly thanked His Highness. No one knew better than him how cruel and merciless His Highness could be. The matter this time was so serious that it was really rare to be able to survive. Jun Jiuqing put his hands behind his back, tilted his head, and glanced at the bookshelf again. If she wants to come, it's normal that you can't stop her. Shang Binghe was stunned. Immediately, a deep shock appeared in his eyes. You mean that person? But didn't that person already? Shang Binghe was full of disbelief. But since Jun Jiuqing said so, it couldn't be false. He felt a lingering fear, and his back broke out in cold sweat. I see. But why would that person appear here? Jun Jiuqing narrowed his eyes, and a glimmer of light flashed in his eyes. He expected her to come back, but he didn't expect her to come back so soon. Although her strength was not as strong as before, to be able to enter this place quietly and open the mechanism, it was obvious that she was quite capable. He had underestimated her. Your Highness, then, what do you plan to do next? Shang Binghe asked uneasily. Jun Jiuqing thought for a moment, and his thin lips curled slightly. His voice was hoarse and his eyes were cold. Then let Chu Ning stay in another place. Chu Luyue had just arrived outside the study, and hid in the shadows, when she heard this sentence. She frowned. Jun Jiuqing had obviously guessed that she was the one who did it. But his first reaction was to move Chu Ning to another place? Why was he doing this? Chu Ning came from an ordinary family, and they didn't have any interactions. Jun Jiuqing cared so much about Chu Ning because of her. He wanted to use this as a bargaining chip to blackmail her after all. You can leave first. This was Jun Jiuqing talking to Shang Binghe. Yes. Shang Binghe responded and quickly retreated. This time, under the light in the room, Chu Luyue finally saw Shang Binghe's face clearly. She was suddenly stunned, because she seemed to have seen this face before. Chu Luyue's brows gradually furrowed. She was sure that she had never seen this person in her memory. But this face, she did feel that it was very familiar. As if she had known it before. Could it be that Shang Binghe had also appeared in that missing memory? Just as Chu Luyue was thinking about this, a hoarse and beautiful voice suddenly sounded in her ears. Welcome late-night guests. I have been waiting for you for a long time. Chapter 1006. Chu Luiyue was slightly shocked and looked up. She saw that the door of the study was not closed after Shang Binghe left. Jun Jiuqing walked out and said to the guards around him, "All of you are dismissed and wait outside the courtyard. Without I's order, no one is allowed to come in." Although the guards were puzzled, they immediately responded respectfully, "Yes." After that, the guards left in an orderly manner. After a while, there was no one around the study. "Can I come in now?" Jun Jiuqing turned his head and looked in the direction of Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue thought for a moment and walked out decisively. Since it had come to this point, there was no need to be secretive. Coincidentally, there were some things that she wanted to talk to Jun Jiuqing about. Jun Jiuqing looked at her and raised his eyebrows slightly, then turned and walked in. Chu Luiyue followed closely behind. After entering the room, Jun Jiuqing sat down and smiled at Chu Luiyue. "Since you've already been here, you can sit anywhere you want." Chu Luiyue did not care about his teasing and sat down opposite him. The two of them faced each other. Jun Jiuqing looked at her with interest, and there seemed to be light flowing between his eyebrows. "Did you come here like this last time? There's no need for these pleasantries. I'm sure you know why I'm here today. Let's get straight to the point." Chu Luiyue was very direct. Jun Jiuqing's smile faded a little. "I wanted to reminisce about the past, but it seems that you're still as heartless as ever." "There's no need to reminisce about the past. You can tell that I've forgotten a lot of things. Now that you and I are just strangers, there's no point in saying these things. Why don't you tell me what I want in order for you to let my father go?" Chu Luiyue was very straightforward. From the letter to the note later, everything showed that Jun Jiuqing definitely knew a lot about her. They might have known each other in the past, but now she had completely forgotten, so it was useless to mention it. Besides, she had a feeling, even when they first met, the relationship between them might not have been that good. Jun Jiuqing leaned back in his chair. "I's request is very simple. Didn't I tell you before?" Chu Luiyue slightly frowned. "When?" Jun Jiuqing gently stroked his brows, smiling faintly. "When we were at ancient Phoenix Mountain. You don't think that I was just joking?" Chu Luiyue was stunned. She remembered what Junhe said, that as long as she agreed to marry him, everything would be hers. At that time, she thought that he was referring to the boundless origin power and that divine power. She didn't expect it to include these. "If you agree, I will release Chu Ning immediately and apologize in person." Jun Jiuqing's thin lips held a hint of a smile, but the look in his eyes didn't seem to be joking. Whatever you want, as long as it's within I's power, I'll agree." Jun Jiuqing stared at her, and something seemed to be rolling in the depths of his demonic eyes. His voice was hoarse, as if he was drunk, and it made people dizzy. "As long as you agree." Chu Luiyue didn't know if it was an illusion, but she heard a trace of desire in this sentence. But she quickly threw this absurd thought to the back of her mind. Desire? A person like Jun Jiuqing was arrogant, unbridled, cruel and merciless, and extremely proud. It was always others who begged him, but he didn't beg others. Thinking about the things he did, each and every one of them vividly reflected his character and means. Chu Luiyue's expression was slightly serious, and her voice was cold. "Are you threatening me with my father's life?" Seeing that her eyes were gradually covered with frost, Jun Jiuqing's eyes moved slightly, and the smile at the corners of his eyes faded a lot. "Yes," he said lazily and carelessly. "I already have a fiancé. Just cancel the engagement. I don't have feelings for you. Just cultivate it slowly. Do you think that by using my father as a bargaining chip to threaten me, we can still cultivate feelings for each other?" Chu Luiyue was so angry that she laughed. She only felt that Jun Jiuqing's idea was extremely absurd. "Although I don't know what you want to do, why you must marry me, whether we know each other before, and what kind of past we have. But I can tell you that with what you've done, it's impossible for us to be together. Even if you use all means, I will never agree to this request of yours." Jun Jiuqing just looked at her and did not speak for a long time, until Chu Luiyue thought that he was going to fly into a rage. He suddenly smiled. "You're right. I did use all means for this. He supported his face with one hand and spoke lazily. Chu Xianmin wanted to harm you, so I gave her red blood goo. The people from the other academies wanted to fight with you for first place, so I gave them the 7 coldness poison. These people were not very obedient, so I might as well get rid of them all. Chu Luiyue slowly widened her eyes, and a look of shock flashed across her face. You did all those things. You wanted to take action against me from then on? If I didn't do that, how could you come back so quickly? Jun Jiuqing's smile deepened. They're just some ants. How could they be your match? I just wanted them to help you improve your skills quickly, so that you could come back as soon as possible. Look, it's only been a year, and you're back, right? Chu Luiyue was shocked and speechless. Sheng Guanyu, do you think that you're the only one waiting to return to Xiling? Jun Jiuqing stretched out his hand and pointed at himself. I am also waiting for your return. Digression 6 p.m. Chapter 1007. Chu Luiyue felt a chill in her heart. Jun Jiuqing had done so many things in secret, but now he said that it was all to help her? She had gone through so much torture, but it seemed to him that it did not matter. If she had been careless, she would have been dead. Jun Jiuqing seemed to have seen through Chu Luiyue's thoughts and smiled faintly. I am not worried that something will happen to you. To you this is nothing. If she could not even deal with this, then she would not be her. Chu Luiyue frowned. It was only now that she knew that many of the troubles she had encountered before were actually set up by Jun Jiuqing. And he actually said it in such a dignified manner. I don't accept it. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath. I don't care what you think or do. It has nothing to do with me. I want to go back to the West Hill. It is my business. I don't need anyone to interfere. After all, what happened before is in the past. It is meaningless to pursue it now. I only want you to return my father in one piece. As for your conditions, I will not agree to a single word. She looked coldly at Jun Jiuqing. Even if you don't agree to let him go today, I will find a way to get him out. As for anything else, it is absolutely impossible. Jun Jiuqing's devilishly handsome face was still smiling. However, this smile was like fireworks that had been set off. It quickly cooled down, with a trace of bone-chilling coldness. Have you thought it through? He asked slowly. Chu Luiyue did not speak, but her expression was firm. She had already acquiesced. The room fell into a dead silence. The space seemed to be frozen inch by inch. After a while, Jun Jiuqing stood up. In that case, there is no need for us to continue this conversation. Chu Luiyue also stood up. I am here today to take my father away. Jun Jiuqing raised his eyebrows slightly, as if he did not take her words to heart at all. He chuckled lightly. Don't waste your energy. Didn't you hear what I said just now? Chu Luiyue's pupils shrank. What do you mean? Jun Jiuqing tilted his head and smiled wickedly. I mean, Chu Ning is no longer here. He glanced at Chu Luiyue. I know that you came here today because you're fully prepared. Unfortunately, you won't be able to use your skills. If you want to bring Chu Ning back, either you change your mind, or you have to defeat I personally. Chu Luiyue clenched his fists in his sleeves. I still have matters to attend to, so I won't accompany you. You go ahead. As Jun Jiuqing spoke, he immediately left, as if he was not worried that Chu Luiyue would flip through all the traps here and find Chu Ning. Oh right. Jun Jiuqing stopped in his tracks and tilted his head slightly. The moonlight shone on his face, outlining a perfect arc. The expression in his eyes was half bright and half dark. Since you trust your fiancé so much, why don't you go take a look and see what he's doing now? You'll definitely be pleasantly surprised. With that, he left without looking back. Chu Luiyue stood in the study for a while. When Jun Jiuqing's figure completely disappeared, she frowned and walked to the bookshelf. With her previous experience and Sun Yi's help, it was very easy for her to solve this level. Click. The secret compartment opened. As expected, there was nothing left inside. Chu Luiyue then opened the other traps one after another, but it was to no avail. Most importantly, she did not sense Chu Ning's aura here. This basically confirmed that Chu Ning was no longer here. However, there was one thing that Chu Luiyue could not understand. It had not been long since Jun Jiuqing gave the order to take Chu Ning away. But Chu Ning had completely disappeared. How did he do it? Chu Liyue thought for a long time, but could not figure it out. Seeing that it was hopeless to find him here, she finally chose to leave. The night seemed to have passed by peacefully. Early the next morning, Chu Liyue received news that the people from the Xian dynasty and the Eastcom dynasty were planning to leave. Ancient Phoenix Mountain had been destroyed, and everything was settled. There was no point in them staying here any longer. As for the Taiyu dynasty, which had suffered heavy losses, they had already left the day before. Chu Liyue originally wanted to stay here for a few more days and try to find her father's whereabouts. However, after thinking about it, she felt that it was too dangerous to do so. As time passed, it was inevitable that some people would become suspicious. More importantly, after her negotiation with Jun Jiuqing that night, Jun Jiuqing announced to the outside world that he was in seclusion and would not see anyone. It was obvious that he did not intend to continue negotiating with her. Therefore, Chu Liyue finally decided to bring a few people back with her. On the other hand, she sent people to keep an eye out and secretly search for Chu Ning's whereabouts. Chu Liyue's only consolation was that Jun Jiuqing wanted to use Chu Ning as a bargaining chip and would not go too far. At the very least, she did not have to worry about Chu Ning's life for the time being. However, every time she thought of Chu Ning's suffering appearance in the mirror that day, she still felt terrible. Now she could only think of another way. Chu Liyue and the others' return journey was quite smooth. Moreover, because their strength had increased, their speed had also become much faster. Except for Chang Wanzhou, who was still in a coma, the others had more or less improved after going through the baptism of 3 elements as one's prominence. Not only had their injuries healed, but Jian Fengqi and the other 2 had also broken through their original realms. Mu Hongyu was the only one who had not broken through. This made her feel a little anxious, because she had been at the peak of the 6th level for a long time. After such a long period of cultivation, coupled with the 3 elements as one's prominence this time, she had thought that she would be able to break through smoothly. However, she had not. She had vaguely touched that layer of barrier, but she had not been able to take that step. Sigh, now I'm the one with the lowest realm. On the way back, Mu Hongyu could not help but sigh. In fact, Mu Hongyu's talent and strength were not weak, and the speed of her breakthrough was not slow either. Compared to the vast majority of cultivators, she was definitely one of the best. Unfortunately, the people traveling with her were the top geniuses of the Tianling dynasty, so she naturally did not stand out as much. It's not necessarily bad to break through a little later. Chu Liyue comforted her. The 7th level warrior is a big threshold, and it's not easy to cross it. Moreover, you have the faint yuan body, so you have to be extremely cautious. Mu Hongyu nodded. When she was waiting for Chu Liyue outside the ancient Phoenix Mountain, she had heard many people talk about this. Chu Liyue could cross this threshold smoothly without any preparation, but it did not mean that everyone could do it. Otherwise, when they saw Chu Liyue succeed, everyone would not have such a big reaction. I know it's difficult to break through to the 7th level, but what does this have to do with my faint yuan body? Could it be that it was harder for her to break through than ordinary people because of this? Chu Liyue looked at her and nodded seriously. Chapter 1008. Mu Hongyu was joking at first, but when she saw Chu Liyue nodding, her face immediately stiffened. Chu Liyue explained. The faint yuan body has not appeared for thousands of years. Speaking of which, it is even rarer than the Tianjin Yuan Meridian. Moreover, I can learn a lot from the Taizu. After all, I have the guidance of my predecessors. But you are different. The faint yuan body is extremely rare, and there are almost no records related to it. So far, I have only seen an ancient book that mentioned it, but it was only a few words and did not go into detail. To put it bluntly, no one knew how to cultivate Mu Hongyu's faint yuan body. She had to rely on herself for everything. In the past, her level was not that high, so she could slowly explore. But in the future, the stronger she was, the more she could not do so. How to cultivate the faint yuan body was a big problem. At present, one thing is certain. When the faint yuan body breaks through to the 7th stage, the divine tribulation summoned should not be underestimated. Mu Hongyu was dumbfounded. No, it can't be the same as yours, right? If that was the case, she was afraid that she would not be able to hold on for long and would be defeated. Chu Luiyue shook his head. Mu Hongyu let out a long sigh of relief. Chu Luiyue smiled again. I don't know either. Mu Hongyu's heart suddenly jumped again. She wailed and held her head with both hands. Then what? You don't even know Lu Yu. Then won't I be dead by then? Jian Fengqi suddenly said. If someone can give you a few pointers in this area, it won't be so scary. Easy for you to say. Mu Hongyu had a headache. Didn't Lu Yu just say that the faint yuan body has not appeared for a long time? How can I find it? Suddenly her voice stopped abruptly, and she raised her head abruptly. No. There is a person. Maybe there is a way. Chu Liyue's eyes flickered. I just don't know if the other party is willing to help. Mu Hongyu rubbed her nose worriedly. Who is it? Yuan Jinghong poked her head over to Mu Hongyu's side, her face full of curiosity. Jian Fengqi pressed his head back expressionlessly. Mu Hongyu frowned, and seemed to be in a dilemma. Chu Luiyue finally asked. You mean, Red Moon Desert? Mu Hongyu's eyes lit up, and she nodded vigorously. Yes, not long after they entered the Red Moon Desert, they went their separate ways. For a long time after that, Mu Hongyu was chased by a cloud of yellow sand. At that time, she only cared about running for her life. But now that she thought about it, it was obvious that someone had done it on purpose to help her increase her strength. That period of time in the Red Moon Desert should be the time when she improved the fastest. It was obvious that the person behind this must be a top-notch powerhouse. When she shuttled through space, even Jian Shai might not be able to react quickly. However, at that time in the Red Moon Desert, the other party seemed to be able to track her whereabouts immediately. It would be great if I could invite him. After the excitement, Mu Hongyu's almond-shaped eyes dimmed again. Why can't you invite him? Chu Luiyue smiled. I'll invite him for you. It seemed that Mu Hongyu had indeed benefited a lot in the Red Moon Desert back then. Otherwise, her first reaction would not be to think of that at this time. Moreover, according to Chu Liyue's understanding of Debao and the others, they might really be able to solve this problem. Really? Mu Hongyu was in disbelief. She vaguely knew that Chu Liyue seemed to know the mysterious powerhouse in the Red Moon Desert, but she had never asked in detail. Now it seemed that she was very confident. It shouldn't be a problem, but you might need to make a trip to the Red Moon Desert yourself. After all, Debao and the others couldn't leave from there, so only Mu Hongyu could go. No problem. Mu Hongyu was not afraid of hardships, so what was such a small problem? Chu Liyue's eyes curved when she saw the other woman's ambition. Okay, then when we return to West Hill, we'll get to it. After going through a few teleportation portals, they finally returned to the West Hill at noon that day. Chu Liyue brought Chang Wanzhou straight back to the palace and sent someone to invite Yu Qisong over. He wanted to help check on Chang Wanzhou's situation. Before they returned to Zhaoyu Hall, Shang Guanyu, who had heard the news, rushed over and pulled Chu Liyue up and down for a long time. Chu Liyue was originally seriously injured, but because she had broken through to rank 7 and recovered her Tianjing Yuan Meridian, she had been recovering quickly in the past 2 days. Basically, there were only some superficial wounds left. Shang Guanyu looked around and made sure that she was fine before he breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Yuer didn't suffer any serious injuries. Only God knew how he had survived this period of time. On one hand, the Tianling dynasty was the weakest among these dynasties, and it was inevitable that they would be bullied if they went there. On the other hand, the opening of ancient Phoenix Mountain was bound to be dangerous, and they would be injured if they were not careful. Looking at Shang Guanyu's nervous expression, Chu Liyue smiled and said, "Father, don't worry, your daughter is fine." As soon as she spoke, Shang Guanyu realized that her aura seemed to be different. Immediately his eyes widened in shock. You're now a rank 7 warrior?" Chu Liyue smiled calmly and nodded. "Yes. My luck was good, so I broke through. If other people who were present at that time heard what she said, they would probably die of anger. Along the way, why didn't you say that you also took the divine power left behind by the Baiming Taizu? You even destroyed their ancient Phoenix Mountain. Shangguan Yu didn't notice anything wrong. The Tianling dynasty and the Baiming dynasty were far apart, and news traveled slowly. So now they still didn't know what the situation was over there. And Chu Luyue naturally wouldn't take the initiative to say that she almost lost her life. Ah, by the way, your daughter got a great opportunity this time and recovered her Tianjing Yuan meridian. Shangguan Yu was shocked when he heard that, and he didn't say anything for a long time. In the end, he only touched Chu Luyue's head, his palm trembling slightly. Good. His voice was faintly hoarse, and it was obvious that he was suppressing his emotions. Chu Luyue held his hand tightly. Father, are you relieved now? Shangguan Yu smiled in relief, but the corners of his eyes were slightly red. After all, they were father and daughter connected by blood, and they knew each other best. At this moment, the sound of something breaking through the air suddenly came from the sky. Chu Luyue looked up and saw a figure walking in the air. In the blink of an eye, it was already in front of her. Chu Luyue widened her eyes slightly, and she couldn't believe her eyes. Shue. The demon beast in front of her was dirty all over, and its hair was stuck into clumps of yellow. It was almost impossible to recognize its original appearance. Was it really that cute white lion? Chapter 1009. Ao. Shue looked at Chu Luyue pitifully and whimpered. It actually appeared with such a face. It was too embarrassing. Where did you come from? Chu Luyue asked as he stepped forward. Shue took a step back and shook its body crazily, causing yellow sand to fall from its body. The corner of Chu Luyue's eyes twitched. You didn't just go to the Red Moon Desert, did you? This aura was too familiar. Shue lowered its head sadly, obviously admitting it. Chu Luyue facepalmed. Why did you go there all of a sudden? Where's your master? Shue was furious. If it wasn't for its master's order to go to the Red Moon Desert, would it be like this? Let's go. I'll take you to take a bath first. As Chu Luyue spoke, he hooked his finger at Shue. Not to mention anything else, it was too embarrassing to come out with such an appearance. When Shue heard this, she became happy and hurriedly followed him. After bidding farewell to Shangguan Yu, Chu Luyue brought Shue back to Zhaoyu Hall. Originally, Shue wanted to be closer to her, but it was a pity that its body was too dirty, so it could only restrain itself and follow behind Chu Luyue by 3 steps. An hour later, Chu Luyue finished packing up and was about to go out to see Shue next door when he was pounced on by a huge snow-white figure. Fortunately, Chu Luyue had already broken through to the 7th rank and could barely catch Shue. After washing frantically several times and confirming that it had returned to its fluffy and snow-white appearance, it was relieved and intimately leaned towards Chu Luyue's face. Pa! A small wing flapped out and blocked Shue's head. Dumpling had unknowingly appeared between Chu Luyue and Shue. Her eyes filled with impatience. Be careful. Don't you know whose master this is? Shue snorted. She couldn't be bothered to argue with Dumpling, who asked him to be so naive and choose such a master. Chu Luyue lifted Dumpling onto his shoulder and rubbed Shue's head. Can you tell me now? It didn't seem like a coincidence that it came from the Red Moon Desert. Shue raised its claws. An icy blue energy surged out and quickly condensed into a palm-sized ice cube. There were 2 lines of faint handwriting on the ice. Girl, come quickly. It was signed by Dugu Mabao. Was this news from Dabao and the others? But why did they suddenly call her over? And why did they send Shue to deliver the message? The ice quickly melted and disappeared. Chu Luyue glanced at Shue and nodded. I was planning to make a trip there as well. This is perfect. Shue nodded. That's good. With her around, those few people would probably be a little more lenient towards it for her sake. Right? By the way, Rongxiao, what has he been busy with recently? Chu Luyue suddenly remembered what Jun Jiuqing said before. Surprise, what was he referring to? Shue blinked guiltily and shook its head hard. It hadn't been by its master's side recently, so it didn't know anything. Seeing its reaction, Chu Luiyue, who didn't think much of it, suddenly became suspicious. Shue Shue shook its head even harder. I don't know. I really don't know. Chu Luiyue laughed. Looks like it might really be a surprise. She pinched Shue Shue's ear and said in a gentle voice that seemed to be bewitching. When this matter is over, bring me to see him secretly and give him a surprise, okay? Shue Shue nodded subconsciously. Then, it realized what Chu Luiyue meant and widened its eyes in shock. Bring me there. This. Good girl, I know Shue Shue is the most obedient. Chu Luiyue patted Shue Shue's head gently and smiled. Then it's a deal. Shue Shue was stunned. Secretly bring me there. That doesn't seem to be a good idea, does it? Master didn't even say anything. If I go there rashly. Ow! Shue Shue wailed and buried its head in pain. It was too difficult. Chu Luiyue got up and left. Before she went, there were still some things to deal with. Chu Luiyue came to Huayang Palace again. Pushing open the door of the main hall, a rotten and unpleasant smell assailed her nose. The room was a mess. Everything that could be smashed had already been smashed into pieces. There wasn't even a place to stand on the ground. Master. Chi Han was guarding the door and bowed. During this period, he had been in charge of guarding Huayang Palace. How's Shengguan doing recently? Chi Han said. She's already half dead. She's only hanging on by a breath with the pills every day. He was the one who forced Shengguan to stay alive. Shengguan had wanted to die for a long time. Too many things had happened on the day of the wedding. She had lost everything, and could only linger on in this lonely and cold palace. She was living a life worse than death. In between, she had tried to commit suicide countless times, but to no avail. However, there seems to be a problem with her mental state. Day after day of torture, she couldn't live or die. If it was anyone else, they would find it hard to bear. Chu Luiyue nodded slightly. I'll go in and take a look. Chi Han was a little hesitant. Master, this palace is too dirty and messy. Why don't I bring her out? No need. I've been everywhere. Why would I care about this? Chu Luiyue waved her sleeves, barely opened up a path and walked in. Chi Han didn't say anything else and followed closely behind. There was dead silence in the messy main palace. This once magnificent palace had now become a huge coffin. As for Shengguan, she had undoubtedly become the only living dead here. Chu Luiyue looked around, and finally saw Shengguan in a corner behind the bed. Shengguan seemed to have sensed something, and looked up timidly. At first glance, Chu Luiyue didn't even recognize that this person was Shengguan. It had only been a month, but she had completely changed. Her clothes were ragged, her body was dirty, and she was emaciated. From afar, she looked like a skeleton draped in rags. Her face was full of scars, and one of her eyes was deeply sunken with a festering wound. That's because she dug out one of her eyes. Chi Han said. Chu Luiyue finally understood what he meant when he said that Shengguan was mentally unstable. But Shengguan only glanced at her, then lowered her head and curled into a ball, as if she wanted to hide herself completely in an invisible corner. At the same time, she began to pull her hair again. She seemed to have lost her sense of pain. With a casual pull, she pulled out a bunch of hair. Her expression was dull, her eyes were empty, and she was muttering something from time to time. Chu Luiyue listened carefully for a while and barely heard Jiang Yuqing's name. Like me? No, don't like her. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes. Has Jiang Yuqing been here recently? Chapter 10:10. No. Chi Han replied immediately. Ever since you separated the two of them and locked them up here, I have been watching them closely and have never let them leave their rooms. Chu Luiyue paused. Although their rooms are not next to each other, they seem to be quite close to each other? Yes. Chi Han responded and looked at her strangely. Could it be that Master suspects that there is something wrong with this? Chu Luiyue did not say anything. Actually, this was just a guess of hers. Shengguan was not pretending to be crazy. She was really crazy. However, when she came previously, although Shengguan was in extreme pain, she was only in despair and did not show any signs of going crazy. If Shengguan was going to go crazy, She should have gone crazy on the day of her wedding, and after losing everything. Now it was more like she had suffered some kind of strong stimulation. And the culprit, other than Jiang Yuqing, who she kept talking about, Chu Luiyue really could not think of anyone else. She thought for a moment and turned to walk out. Just as she reached the door, she heard a bang in the room. Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly skipped a beat, and she turned back to look. Shang Guanwan's head hit the wall beside her, and blood splattered everywhere. Qi Han immediately rushed over and checked her breathing. Master, she is dead. Chu Luiyue looked at him calmly, but she didn't seem surprised. Look at the wound on her head. Qi Han nodded and took a closer look. The moment he saw it, his expression changed drastically. Her skull doesn't seem to have been smashed. Although the bloody hole was scary, after careful inspection, Qi Han found that the wound was neat and tidy. It seems like someone used a knife to cut open her skull. This is it. Chu Luiyue retracted her gaze. She has been a cripple for a long time, and has been trapped here for many days. I'm afraid she doesn't even have the strength to walk. How could her skull have been smashed when she hit the wall? You mean, this was premeditated? Qi Han frowned. However, Huayang Palace had always been heavily guarded. Logically speaking, it was impossible. Chu Luiyue waved his hand. Deal with her. This consort will go out and take a look. Yes. When they reached the courtyard, Chu Luiyue noticed that the leaves on the trees in the courtyard were falling. It was still the end of summer, so it shouldn't be like this. Chu Luiyue walked to the trees and looked at them. It could be seen that these trees were beginning to wither. Moments later, Chu Luiyue summoned the long yuan sword and cut the tree in half. A stream of black liquid suddenly gushed out. Chu Luiyue quickly swung his sword. A gust of wind swept past. That thing splashed onto the ground, and the surrounding grass and leaves quickly withered. Chu Luiyue frowned. The inside of this tree had been hollowed out by something long ago. Men, uproot all these trees. The black cavalry, who were in charge of guarding the courtyard, quickly came forward. After a while, all the trees in the courtyard were cleared out. Every tree had its core hollowed out, just like the one Chu Luiyue had previously chopped off. The roots of the trees were almost completely black. The roots of these trees were intertwined underground, and it was convenient for them to connect with each other. Chu Luiyue vaguely felt that she seemed to have uncovered a huge mystery. However, there was a thick fog in front of her, and it was extremely difficult to solve it. She thought of something, and walked toward the backyard of Huayang Palace. You guys continue to guard here. The rest of you follow this consort. Just as she arrived at the backyard, Chu Luiyue realized that something was wrong. She clearly remembered that when she first came to Huayang Palace as Chu Luiyue, all kinds of flowers and plants were planted here. Even on a snowy day in winter, when the cold wind was bone-chilling, this place was still filled with colorful flowers and vibrant colors. At that time, she was secretly puzzled. Shang Guanwan was not someone who liked flowers and plants. It was truly baffling for her to do all this. At that time, she had even asked whether it was intentional or not. Chani only said that the hot spring water was used to nourish these flowers, which allowed them to bloom for so long. Chu Luiyue walked closer. At this time, these things should have been blooming, but they were already starting to wither. Chu Luiyue stared at the withered leaves and stems, as well as the withered petals, and said, "Clean up all these flowers and plants as well." The backyard of Huayang Palace was very big, and almost all of it was filled with flowers and plants. Fortunately, the black cavalry had always been very efficient, so they finished it quickly. Chu Luiyue looked carefully. As expected, the roots of these things had already turned black. Dig again. In the evening, the backyard of Huayang Palace was finally completely dug up. The water trough that was used to draw hot spring water had long dried up. Chu Luiyue jumped down and looked around. She found an entrance and an exit here. Other than that, there was also a doorway. The doorway was very deep, and it was obviously a tunnel that led to somewhere else. Chu Luiyue looked in this direction. This direction seemed to be in the same direction as the Imperial Ancestral Hall. Chu Luiyue was about to walk in. "Your Majesty," the black cavalry blocked her. At this time, anyone could tell that there was something wrong with this tunnel. How could they let Her Majesty directly take the risk? Qi Han, who had already finished dealing with Shang Guanwan, also rushed back. He was shocked when he saw this scene. Master, why don't I go in and scout for you first? Chu Luihua shook her head. This is the Tianling Palace. What do I have to worry about? Even if it really led to the Imperial Ancestral Hall, it was the Shangguan family's ancestral hall. Who had the right to be impudent? She thought for a moment and chose a few people, including Qi Han, to go with her. Qi Han saw that he could not stop her, so he changed his method. No matter what, he wanted to walk in front. Chu Luihua could not dissuade him, so she let him go. There were a few people at the back who were in charge of bringing up the rear. The group of people walked in just like that. The tunnel was narrow and long, and the surroundings were relatively rough. It could be seen that it had been dug not long ago. Chu Luihua was sure that it had been dug out in the past 2 years. Since it appeared in Huayang Palace, it was obviously Shang Guanwan's work. Of course, Jiang Yuqing might also be involved. Qi Han held a pearl and led the way. From the surroundings, it seemed that Shang Guanwan and the others had not been here many times. But this still stunned the few people who were traveling with them. Who would have thought that there would be such a secret passage under the palace? They were silent along the way. Realizing that this matter might have serious implications, their expressions became more and more serious. The atmosphere was cold. After about a quarter of an hour, a ray of light finally appeared in front of them. We've reached the exit. Qi Han whispered and looked at Chu Luihua. Master, I'll go take a look first. Chu Luihua shook her head. No need. The Imperial Ancestral Hall is in front. Digression old time. Chapter 10-11. That was the place where she had decided to die in her previous life. No one was more familiar with it than her. There seemed to be a faint smell of burning flames in the air. It was heavy and desolate. Chu Luihua walked forward. After walking for a while, there was a staircase. Beside the staircase, there was a luminous pearl. The light they saw earlier obviously came from this. She continued to move upwards, and soon came into contact with a jade board. There was a circular groove on the jade board. Chu Luihua thought for a while, and pressed the luminous pearl next to it. It fit perfectly. Click. The jade board slowly moved away. A ray of light seeped in from the gap. Chu Luihua raised her hand to cover her eyes. When the jade board was completely moved away, she jumped. Qi Han and the others quickly followed. After suddenly exiting the dark and narrow tunnel, and adapting to the light for a short while, Chu Luihua looked around. With a glance, she was sure that this was the West Hall of the royal family's ancestral hall. Because of the fire 2 years ago, this place had become a dilapidated place. It was full of traces, desolate and silent. This was the first time Chu Luihua had entered this place after her rebirth. She pursed her lips. At that time, she only wanted to die together with Jiang Yuqing and the others. She didn't expect that the fire would burn for so long and directly destroy the entire ancestral hall. So this tunnel really leads directly from Huayang Hall to the royal family's ancestral hall. After Qi Han came out, he stood behind Chu Luihua and looked around. He couldn't help but murmur in a low voice. They must have done this for a purpose, but why? Chu Luihua was also thinking about this question. She lowered her head and carefully examined the jade board. The wear on the edge was clearly visible. This tunnel, perhaps it had appeared earlier than she had expected. The ancestral hall was an important place for the royal family. Ordinary people couldn't easily get close to it. Why did they take such a big risk to dig such a tunnel? Moreover, there was one more thing that Chu Luihua didn't understand. If they wanted to kill her, they could have done it in many other places. Why did they have to choose the Imperial Ancestral Hall? Chu Luihua paused for a while, but did not find any valuable clues. Almost everything here had been burned to the ground in the fire. Moreover, the Imperial Ancestral Hall was an important place. Even if Shang Guanwan came here quietly through the tunnel, she must be extremely careful. After looking around the room for a while, Chu Luihua went out and headed for the main hall. As soon as he stepped out of the door, Chu Luihua discovered that there seemed to be some fresh traces of renovation on the periphery of the West Palace Hall. This was obviously what Shang Guanwan had requested before. However, before the renovation was completed, Shang Guanwan had an accident, so the work here was delayed. Now that he looked at it again, he could not help but sigh. Chu Luiyue stood in front of the door for a moment and felt something dripping on his face. She raised her head and saw that the sky had darkened at some point in time. At this moment, there were raindrops falling from the sky. Soon, these raindrops connected into lines, like countless silk threads, connecting the heaven and earth together. Chu Luiyue looked forward. The main hall of the Imperial Ancestral Hall, which had been burned down by the fire, looked well preserved from the outside. This was because there was a ward that Taizu had personally set up outside the Imperial Ancestral Hall. Once there was danger, it could be activated. It was a pity that the fire back then had started from inside. From here, she could vaguely see some traces. Master. Shihan followed her and looked at her with a complicated gaze. He wondered how Her Highness was feeling when she decided to give up her virginity here. Now that she was back and saw this scene, how did she feel? To Her Highness, this was the place where she had experienced the most painful days of her life. If not for the fact that she was here to investigate that strange secret passage, Her Highness would probably not be willing to come here again. Chu Luiyue said, "Guard the corridor. I'll go in and take a look." Shihan wanted to follow her in, but looking at her calm and indifferent side profile, he nodded. Yes. Chu Luiyue had never thought that there would be a day when she would come back. Even after she had been reborn, her mind was filled with thoughts of revenge, and she had never thought of coming back here. She seemed to have always subconsciously avoided related questions. She did not know if it was because she had once suffered the deepest betrayal here and experienced the most unforgettable pain. In the past, due to her identity, she could not get close to this place. But now, she had regained her original name and could enter and leave this place at will. But she had never come here once. She did not expect that this time, because of a strange secret passage, she would come back just like this. The rain was getting heavier and heavier, falling on the eaves and corners of the house, making pitter-patter sounds. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath, pushed open the door and walked in. It was as if she had opened a dusty box, and the air was filled with a desolate and old aura. Chu Luiyue looked over. Other than the ancestral tablets placed in the innermost area, which were still intact, the rest had been burned to ashes. She walked over, knelt down in front of the table, and respectfully kowtowed 3 times. Back then, she had been determined to die, and had almost destroyed the ancestral tablets as well. If that had really been the case, there was nothing she could do about it. A translucent figure appeared beside Chu Luiyue. It was Taizu. He stared at the tablets for a long time, then looked at Chu Luiyue, who was kneeling on the ground and had not gotten up for a long time, and sighed softly. Girl, you don't have to blame yourself. The ones at fault were Jiang Yuqing and Shang Guanwan. Even if there's a punishment, it should be the 2 of them who bear it. You are innocent. I don't blame you. If these people knew, they wouldn't blame you either. Only then did Chu Luiyue straighten up. Something seemed to be surging in her chest. There were thousands of words in his mind, but in the end, he only had one sentence. Thank you, Taizu. Taizu smiled and touched her head across the void. You're a good girl. It's a blessing for the Shangguan family to have you. Although he was only a soul now and didn't feel anything from such a touch, Chu Luiyue's heart still softened. She looked around and exhaled softly, as if she wanted to release all the emotions that had been accumulating inside her. When I go back today, I'll send people to repair the ancestral hall. There's no hurry. What's the point of staying in the ancestral hall? It's still better to run around with you. Taizu teased. Chu Luiyue didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The trace of grief and guilt from before eased a lot. It was really lucky to be favored by Taizu. What's that? Taizu's eyes suddenly fixed on a corner of the table. There was a dark red bloodstain there. Chu Luiyue glanced at it. That's because I bumped into it back then. That's why. Chu Luiyue was about to explain when she suddenly felt the water droplet in her dantian shake violently. Chapter 10-12. Chu Liyue's voice came to an abrupt end. After the water droplet swayed for a while, it did not stop. Instead, it began to ripple with a certain rhythm. The force in her body seemed to be affected and began to flow rapidly. Chu Liyue frowned slightly. This water droplet was always motionless most of the time. If it wasn't for special circumstances, it basically wouldn't move at all. Why was it suddenly? Girl, what's wrong? Sensing that something was wrong with Chu Liyue, Taizu asked with concern. Before Chu Liyue could answer, the water droplet in her dantian quickly transformed into a transparent broken page. It floated quietly, and the 7 lines that symbolized a rank 7 warrior had disappeared. What replaced it was a blood-red rune that suddenly appeared in the middle of the damaged page. Chu Liyue was very familiar with this thing, because after her rebirth, she had seen such a blood rune appear in her palm. But now, why did it suddenly appear? As if she had received some kind of guidance, Chu Liyue stretched out her hand. Just as her fingertips touched the remaining dried bloodstain, she saw that the bloodstain suddenly came to life. It quickly condensed into a ball and floated up. Then, it landed in Chu Liyue's palm, and quickly transformed into an identical rune. At this moment, Chu Liyue's temple suddenly felt a sharp pain. Countless images flashed through her mind. Familiar, unfamiliar. Remembered, unremembered. It was as if something was going to drill out of her mind. Girl, what's wrong with you? Seeing Chu Liyue's appearance, Taizu suddenly became anxious. But Chu Liyue seemed to be unable to hear his shouts at this time. There seemed to be countless voices intertwining in her ears. Among them, only one voice was particularly clear. That was Rong Xiu's voice. He seemed to be saying something to her. But Chu Liyue could no longer hear him clearly. Seeing that the situation was getting worse, Taizu was about to make a move in a hurry. But he saw Chu Liyue's body go limp and fall to the ground. Girl. Taizu hurriedly went over and shouted a few times. Fortunately, Chu Liyue didn't completely faint. Seeing Taizu's nervous appearance, she stood up. Taizu, don't worry, I'm fine. How can you be fine? Just listen to how weak your voice is. Taizu couldn't help but raise his voice. At this time this girl was still holding? I just remember something. Chu Liyue rubbed the space. The heart-wrenching pain gradually dissipated, but the lingering effects were still there. It was truly unbearable. Hearing this, Taizu says, what did you remember? He vaguely knew that Chu Liyue had lost a part of her extremely important memories. And those memories were obviously related to the soul in the black pyramid in her body. If she remembered, it's still a little messy now. Chu Liyue helplessly laughed bitterly. Just now, many images that she couldn't remember had appeared in her mind. However, most of those images were very blurry and flashed by in a hurry. It was difficult to recall them now, and she could only barely remember a small part. Moreover, in the part of the memories that she could remember, no one appeared. Most of them were blurry scenes. I can't remember right now. It's fine. This kind of thing can't be rushed. Aren't you slowly recovering now? You'll definitely remember everything in the future. Taizu heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that she was fine. In his opinion, Chu Liyue's own life and safety were the most important. As for the rest, they could be considered later. Looking at Chu Liyue's tired face, Taizu's heart ached. His gaze swept across her palm, and he wanted to say something but hesitated. Chu Liyue noticed this abnormality. She looked over, and then looked at her palm. The blood-colored rune had disappeared at some point, and the remaining bloodstains on the corner of the table had long disappeared. Other than the traces of the broken corner of the table, which recorded everything that had happened in the past, the rest had disappeared. If it wasn't for the fact that Chu Liyue had left it behind, and that she had seen it with her own eyes, she would have thought that the corner of the table had been like this from the beginning, clean and without a trace of blood. Taizu, do you have something to say? Taizu immediately shook his head. No. Chu Liyue was stunned for a moment, then smiled faintly. I'm fine now. If you have something to say, please say it. Taizu sighed in his heart. This girl was smart and quick-witted. It really wasn't easy to hide from her. He looked around cautiously, then took a step forward and looked into Chu Liyue's eyes. the blood-colored rune that appeared just now. Why do you have it on you? Chu Liyue's pupils shrank, and a glimmer of light flashed across her eyes. You've seen that thing before? Taizu met her gaze and nodded after a while. I've seen it once. Sure enough. Chu Liyue suddenly became spirited. What's the origin of this thing? Taizu shook his head. Tell me first, what's your relationship with this thing? Hearing the unusual seriousness in Taizu's tone, Chu Liyue's heart moved slightly. This blood-colored rune might really have a great origin. I don't know either. Ever since I was reborn, this thing has been with me. Chu Liyue raised her hand as she spoke. At this time, her palm was already white and clean. At that time it appeared here, but it disappeared very quickly. After that, it almost never appeared again. As for this time, why did the blood stain on the table have that kind of reaction? I really don't know. She had thought about this question before, but unfortunately, she couldn't think of an answer. After a long time, she stopped thinking about it. In fact, at this time, in her dantian, the incomplete page had condensed into the shape of a water droplet. It was as if nothing had happened before. However, after listening to Chu Liyue's explanation, Taizu frowned and didn't speak for a long time. Taizu! Chu Liyue shouted. Taizu looked at her with a complicated gaze and said, I've seen this blood-colored rune once. Moreover, I saw it on the body of a great divine ability. Chu Liyue's eyes widened slightly. A powerful person? What kind of person is that? Taizu shook his head, and his gaze was slightly focused, as if he was recalling the scene back then. At that time, I had already founded the Tianling dynasty. I only wanted to break through the 9th stage and step into a higher level. Thus, I abdicated the throne and went to the mainland alone to roam the world. In the process, I met countless experts. Compared to them, I was really not worth mentioning. Chu Liyue was secretly shocked. It wasn't hard to imagine how powerful those people were to make Taizu say such things. And it was also at that time that I saw someone. At that time, he had also shown the same blood-colored rune. When Shang Guanjing said this, he suddenly paused and looked at Chu Liyue with a complicated gaze. This thing is actually not an ordinary rune, but a totem. Chapter 10:13. I don't know where he came from, but when he showed this blood-colored rune, many people were shocked on the spot. It seemed that his identity was extraordinary. Moreover, he only appeared for a while and left very quickly. I only found out later from other people that it was a totem that symbolized status. Logically speaking, this thing shouldn't have appeared in the Tianling dynasty. But girl, where did this thing on your body come from? Just a few short sentences, but they contained an astonishing amount of confidence. Chu Liyue reacted for a while. She chewed on these words repeatedly, and finally gradually realized what they meant. You mean this is actually a symbol of someone's status? Taizu nodded and then shook his head. To be precise, it's a symbol of a sect. This was even stranger. Whether it was Chu Liyue or Shang Guanyu, they shouldn't have anything to do with that place. Moreover, you should have had this blood-colored rune in your body 2 years ago. Otherwise, it wouldn't have left such a mark on this table. Taizu said word by word. With every word he said, Chu Liyue's heart sank a little. Taizu didn't have to joke about this kind of thing with her. Everything he said must be true. Then, this also meant that she had been involved with this thing for a long time. After thinking about it, the most likely thing was that these related things were also related to her lost memories. The two of them fell into silence. The silence spread, and the space froze inch by inch. After a long time, Taizu finally asked, Girl, have you been to the world of divine ruins before? The world of divine ruins. The moment she heard these 3 words, Chu Liyue's heart suddenly trembled. Her expression was startled, and her mind was blank. However, something seemed to be surging in her heart. The world of divine ruins. She opened her mouth and murmured in a low voice. When she said these words, the black pyramid suddenly made a kacha sound, and a second crack appeared on it. Another glimmer of light shone out from within. Chu Liyue closed his eyes, his voice trembling slightly. I should have been there. Patter. Rongxiu's hand slipped, and the book in his hand fell to the ground. He frowned and picked up the book. After thinking for a while, he put it back on the shelf. Your Highness, what's wrong? As soon as Umo entered, he saw His Highness standing motionlessly beside the bookshelf, seemingly in a daze. Rong Xiu came back to his senses with an indifferent expression. It's nothing. However, he didn't expect things to progress so quickly. How are the arrangements for the birthday banquet going? Umo felt a little strange. His Highness had never paid much attention to his birthday celebration. In the past, it was mostly just a simple procedure, and he would never ask about it. This time, for some reason, His Highness seemed to be very concerned about this matter. It was really a first for him to ask such a question. Your Highness, everything has been arranged for the birthday banquet. The people below are also preparing for it without any delay. Rong Xiu nodded. That's good. The people from the various tribes should be here by now, right? Umo bowed. Yes. The various tribes have already sent news that they have already set off, and will arrive in a few days. There are more people this year. Be careful, Rong Xiu lightly reminded. When the time comes, don't spoil the fun. Umo finally couldn't help but look up in surprise, and quickly glanced at his master. Fun? How could His Highness say something like that? In the past, only the most distinguished people from the various tribes were qualified to attend the birthday banquet of the Holy Sun. However, because there was a concubine selection this time, there were naturally more people coming. Although Umo wasn't the main person in charge, he knew that every tribe was going all out to compete. It was said that they had all selected the most outstanding women in their tribes to compete for the position of the Holy Sun's princess. When the time comes, the competition would be fierce. Umo felt a headache whenever he thought of that scene. However, he still respectfully responded. Your Highness, please rest assured. He scratched his head and was about to leave, but in the end, he still forced himself to ask. Your Highness, then, what about Madam? From the beginning until now, His Highness had never mentioned it. If Madam knew about this, Umo shuddered. Of course, he wouldn't think that His Highness had fallen in love with someone else. After all, his master even touched the pantheon record for that person. But what about this matter now? Rong Xiu placed one hand behind his back. His phoenix eyes were deep and his thin lips slightly raised into an extremely faint smile. She will come. The corner of Umo's eyes twitched. Madam is coming? Then wouldn't the concubine selection birthday banquet become a battlefield? Then I will go and receive. No need. Rong Xiu spoke and glanced at Umo indifferently. Let them continue to protect her in secret. As for the rest, I will personally explain to her. Umo was confused, but he didn't dare to ask more. He could only respectfully respond and then leave. After Umo left, Rong Xiu slowly walked to the side of the soft couch. His long body took up most of the soft couch's space. He closed his eyes, his thick eyelashes casting a faint shadow under his eyelids. The bridge of his nose was straight, his lips were moist, and his face was white and translucent like jade. Only his sword-like eyebrows were slightly raised. His voice was low, but with a trace of doting. Little thing, you are getting more and more ruthless. Digression. I want to ask what accessories everyone wants the most? Pillows, keychains, mugs, small tables, canvas bags? Everyone can vote in the comment section and decide according to everyone's wishes. Chapter 10:14. The rain was getting heavier. There was a vast expanse between heaven and earth. There was a layer of mist on the ground. Chi Han stared at it for a while, then turned to look at the tightly shut door of the ancestral hall. Master has been in there for a while, but he hasn't come out yet. I wonder how he's doing. Creak. The door opened, and a slender and tall figure walked out. Chi Han and the others hurried to greet him. Master. As he approached, Chi Han took a quick glance and saw that Chu Liyue's expression seemed to be a little off. What's wrong with you? Chi Han frowned, and a trace of worry grew in his heart. Chu Liyue shook his head. Send someone to guard this place strictly. Without my permission, no one is allowed to come close. Chi Han didn't understand, but he still obeyed. Yes. Also seal that secret passage. Yes. Chu Luiyue looked up at the dark sky and set up a black umbrella. This was left behind by Rong Xiu the last time he came. I'll go to Huayang Palace again. She returned to Huayang Palace this time, of course, not for Shengguan Wan, who had been cleaned up, but for another person who was also imprisoned here, Jiang Yuqing. Chu Luiyue pushed the door open and entered. At a glance, he saw Jiang Yuqing sitting there. Hearing the sound, he looked up with a calm expression. From his thin and haggard face, it could be seen that he had been through a lot during this period. It was just that his psychological endurance was extremely strong. At this point he could still look so calm. When he saw the person who came, there was no shock on his face at all, as if he had already expected it. Chu Luiyue closed the door and walked forward for a while. The two confronted each other. You killed Shengguan Wan. Chu Luiyue went straight to the point. It was not a question, but a statement of affirmation. Jiang Yuqing's expression didn't change. What does her suicide have to do with me? He had stayed here and never left, but he already knew that Shengguan Wan had committed suicide. It was obvious that he was related to this matter. However, although his words were a denial, since he took the initiative to say such things, it seemed that he had no intention of refuting. Jiang Yuqing knew very well. When Shengguan Wan died, Chu Luiyue would definitely sense that something was wrong and connect it to him. In that case, there was no point in talking about this matter. I didn't expect you to want her to die even more than I do. Chu Luiyue's gaze was calm and sharp as he looked at him. It was like a sharp blade that wanted to cut through his disguise and see through his heart. I don't know if it's because you're kind and don't want her to suffer day after day of torture, or are you afraid that if she continues to stay, it will cause trouble? Jiang Yuqing laughed. He originally had a very handsome appearance, but now he was so thin that he almost didn't look human anymore. When he smiled like this, not only did he lose his previous handsomeness, he looked more like a living skeleton draped in human skin. His eyes were faint, and it was very creepy. You're still as smart as before. I can't hide anything from you. This was an admission that he wanted to silence her. You're honest. Chu Luiyue's mind raced, but he really didn't understand why Jiang Yuqing had to kill Shengguan Wan. Judging from her previous reaction, she really didn't know a lot of things. She didn't even know that the black runes in her body came from the Black Demon Cave. Moreover, from the beginning to the end, it was basically Jiang Yuqing who was controlling her. At most, she was an abandoned chess piece. It didn't matter whether she existed or not. Jiang Yuqing was so bold. What was he afraid of? Hearing this, Jiang Yuqing smiled again. Chu Luiyue asked again, how did you kill her? You always know everything. Why do you need me to tell you? Jiang Yuqing played Tai Chi. Chu Luiyue's eyes flashed slightly. I've already ordered people to clean up all the trees and flowers in the backyard of Huayang Palace. Jiang Yuqing's face stiffened for a moment, and the corners of his mouth twitched unnaturally. But he quickly returned to normal. In fact, he had already noticed it before. He just didn't expect her to act so quickly and clean up all these in such a short time. It seems that you rely on these to communicate with the outside world? Chu Luiyue questioned. Jiang Yuqing didn't say a word. These little movements couldn't escape her eyes. He already knew. So now, since she directly pointed it out, he didn't have to say anything more. You also instigated Shengguan Wan to do the secret passage to the Imperial Mausoleum in Huayang Palace, right? Jiang Yuqing closed his eyes and refused to communicate. Chu Luiyue curled her lips coldly. It doesn't matter if you don't want to talk about this. It's not important anyway. However, there is something that I would really like to consult you about. Jiang Yuqing didn't move and didn't respond. Back then, you could have chosen many places to kill me. In fact, it would have been much more convenient for you to do it directly in the Zither room. But why, in the end, you brought me to the Imperial Ancestral Hall? For what reason did you have to do it there? Chu Luiyue's words were incomparably clear, like heavy stones smashing into the empty and deathly silent room. Jiang Yuqing still didn't respond. If it weren't for that weak breath, people would almost think that he was dead. Chu Luiyue waited for a while. Seeing that Jiang Yuqing didn't intend to speak, she raised her eyebrows slightly. She had expected that he wouldn't say anything, just as he wouldn't tell her why he chose to betray her back then. It seems that there's no point for me to continue asking. As Chu Liyue spoke, she turned and walked out. When she reached the door, she suddenly stopped and turned back to look at him. You know that I've been to the Divine Ruins world, right? Jiang Yuqing suddenly opened his eyes. His usually indifferent and calm expression finally cracked inch by inch, and his eyes were filled with shock. But when he saw Chu Liyue's as expected expression, he suddenly realized something. He frowned and slowly clenched his fists. She hadn't completely remembered it. This sentence was just a test. No wonder. Chu Liyue suddenly felt that a layer of fog in front of her had been lifted. It seems that the person behind you is also from the Divine Ruins world? The veins on Jiang Yuqing's forehead throbbed. He looked away and refused to say anything more. He didn't know why Chu Liyue thought of the Divine Ruins world. But this wasn't a good sign. If she remembered everything, it doesn't matter if you don't want to say it. Chu Liyue chuckled. If the person who wants to harm me doesn't want to come, I'll go personally. With that, she pushed open the door and walked out. Just as she took a step, Jiang Yuqing's voice came from behind her. If you go, you'll die without a doubt. Chu Liyue looked back and saw that the corner of Jiang Yuqing's mouth was slowly flowing with black blood. Her pupils shrank, and she immediately raised her hand and waved a scarlet flame. You! Before Jiang Yuqing could finish speaking, his body suddenly exploded. Bang! Chapter 10:15. Chu Liyue missed. Jiang Yuqing's body was quickly destroyed, leaving behind only a pool of black blood. Something surged in it for a moment before quickly dissipating. When Chu Liyue rushed over, the pool of blood had already dried up and was emitting a strong aura of death. It seems that the other party was prepared and directly extracted Jiang Yuqing's soul, allowing him to escape quickly. Taizu said in a deep voice. She stared at it for a long time, her eyes slightly cold. They really acted quickly. She had just noticed a hint of something, and the other party had attacked without hesitation. From this, it could be seen that the other party was stronger than she had imagined, and they were extremely vigilant. Otherwise, they would definitely not have dealt with Jiang Yuqing so quickly. This clue was cut off again. Girl, don't worry too much. Jiang Yuqing's body was destroyed. Even if there was still a soul left, it would still be a great loss to his vitality. If he couldn't recover and find a suitable body, he would be a lonely ghost for the rest of his life. It's a pity that I couldn't kill him in time. Chu Liyue frowned slightly and muttered in a low voice. Killing him now isn't that important. The most important thing is to find the mastermind behind him. That's the person who really wants to harm you. Chu Liyue exhaled softly and nodded in agreement. Then she asked, Taizu, other than that, what else can you see? The other party's methods are extremely hidden, and it's obvious that his background is extraordinary. I'm afraid it'll be difficult to find out immediately. Taizu's voice was solemn. This black blood, and that special smell of death should be the key. If we really want to find the other party, the only way, perhaps, is to personally go to the Divine Ruins world. Chu Liyue nodded. Even if Taizu didn't say anything, she would still go. She had a premonition that the memory she lost should be related to the Divine Ruins world. It's a pity to let him escape just like that. As Chu Liyue spoke, she directly burned the pool of blood with fire until there was nothing left. Within a day, Sheng Guanwan's body and soul were destroyed, and Jiang Yuqing self-destructed and escaped. The two people who had been imprisoned in the Huayang Hall had disappeared without a trace. When Chu Liyue returned to her bedroom, it was already night. After washing up, she wanted to rest, but she couldn't fall asleep as she lay on the bed. After tossing and turning for a while, she sat up. In fact, she had gone through a lot today. She was exhausted both mentally and physically, but in the depths of her mind, she couldn't relax no matter what. Chu Liyue thought for a while, and took out another book. It was the strange diary that she had found on the bookshelf. She had a feeling that this book meant a lot to her. Ever since that day, she had carried the book with her everywhere. She carefully flipped through it. She still couldn't understand. When she turned to the last page, she saw the line again. Exignuinely, Chu Liyue murmured in a low voice. Is this the calendar of the world of God? After thinking for a while, Chu Luiyue put the book back, sat cross-legged, and began to cultivate. After the force in her body ran a few cycles, the waves in her heart gradually calmed down. Early the next morning, Sheng Guanyu came to the Zhaoyu Hall. As soon as he saw Chu Luiyue, Sheng Guanyu asked directly, "Yue, I heard that there was a commotion in the Huayang Hall yesterday?" Seeing that he seemed to be a little nervous, Chu Luiyue felt strange, but still nodded gently. Yes, it was normal for others not to know about such a thing, but Sheng Guanyu would definitely know. Chu Luiyue didn't hide anything from him, and simply told him everything. So he really has the support of the people of the world of God. After listening, Sheng Guanyu's expression was complicated. Chu Luiyue's eyebrows moved slightly. "Father, you already know about the world of God?" She didn't mention this word just now. Sheng Guanyu was also suddenly stunned. "As the Tianling Emperor, of course I know. Not only me, but most of the emperors of the other dynasties have also heard of it. Previously, considering that you have just ascended the throne and have a lot of things to do, you haven't been able to rest, so I haven't told you. But you seem to have already known? Did Taizu tell you?" Chu Luiyue's mind moved. "Yes. The day before yesterday, Taizu mentioned a few words to me." Looking at father's expression, it was clear that he didn't know that she had been to the world of God. Therefore, she did not mention this point. "I see." Sheng Guanyu didn't suspect anything. In fact, he didn't say it before because he considered that her strength was still insufficient at that time. Now that she had broken through to the 7th rank and recovered the Tianjin Yuan Meridian, he could be more at ease. "Now that you have ascended the throne, it's time to tell you." Sheng Guanyu sighed softly. His gaze was distant as if he was deep in thought. Chu Luiyue sat at the side and waited quietly. "Yue, do you know why Yao Chun, where you were, and our Tianling dynasty are superior?" Chu Luiyue thought for a moment, and her eyes suddenly moved. "Heaven's canopy?" "That's right." Sheng Guanyu nodded. "In heaven's canopy, whether it is the density of the force of heaven and earth, or the various resources of heaven and earth, it is much better than outside heaven's canopy. As a result, cultivators in our heaven's canopy are usually much stronger than cultivators outside of heaven's canopy. But in fact, on this continent, in addition to these dynasties, there are many hidden clans. They are the more powerful existences. To us, the world of God is like heaven's canopy to Yao Chun. For people like us, only by becoming a true top powerhouse can we cross this threshold and enter the world of God. Chu Luiyue suddenly asked. "Then, what level do you have to reach to be qualified to enter the world of God?" Sheng Guanyu leaned on the chair and shook his head helplessly with a smile. He stretched out a finger and pointed upwards. "Of course, to break through stage 9 and enter the realm of God." Chu Luiyue had actually vaguely guessed this standard before, but when she heard the exact answer, her heart was still stirred up. If it was really according to this standard, then, how did she enter back then? And what exactly did she experience there? "In the past, you almost broke through. Father had high hopes for you, and thought that it wouldn't take long for you to succeed. I didn't expect." She didn't expect that there would be a sudden change, and all her plans would be disrupted. Fortunately, you are back now." Sheng Guanyu looked at her lovingly. "Cultivate well. When you break through stage 9 and enter the legendary level, you can enter the world of God." Chu Luiyue lowered her eyes and hid the glimmer in her eyes. Wait until then. She was afraid that she couldn't wait any longer. Digression. Continue at 6 o'clock. I feel that everyone likes pillows and canvas bags the most. Chapter 10:16. Just then an announcement came from outside. "Miss Mu from Dragon Teeth Mountain is here." Chu Luiyue looked up and saw that Mu Hongyu had arrived at the door of the hall. "Invite her in." Mu Hongyu followed the palace servants into the hall. When she saw Chu Luiyue, an excited smile appeared on her pretty face, and her almond-shaped eyes lit up. "Lu!" She had just spat out a word when she saw Sheng Guanyu next to her. Only then did she remember that she was in the Imperial Palace. She hurriedly stopped talking and curtsied. "Mu Hongyu greets your majesty and your majesty." Chu Luiyue waved at her. Hongyu, this is my bedroom. You don't have to stand on ceremony. Come have a seat. Mu Hongyu looked at Shang Guanyu nervously. After all, Shang Guanyu had been in a high position for many years. Even though he was wearing ordinary clothes, he still had the aura of an emperor that could not be ignored. Although Mu Hongyu was lively, she knew what to do and what not to do in an occasion. Lu Yu could be polite, but she could not be rude. Shang Guanyu laughed. Mu Hongyu, right? I've heard a lot about you from Muir. Don't be restrained here. I have something to do, so I won't stay here and disturb you. You can chat. Then he got up and was about to leave. Chu Luyue smiled. Imperial father, you should stay here for now. What we're going to talk about next has something to do with you. Oh. Shang Guanyu was a little surprised. Seeing that Chu Luyue did not seem to be joking, he sat down again. Mu Hongyu saw that Shang Guanyu was so amiable, and her nervousness eased a lot. Hongyu has a faint yuan body. It's much harder for her to become a martial artist at the 7th level than ordinary cultivators. Therefore, this time, I plan to bring Hongyu to the Red Moon Desert again, and ask a few seniors I know to give me some pointers. Mu Hongyu and Chu Luyue were very close. Moreover, the virtual yuan body had not appeared for 1,000 years. It would be a pity if it was wasted. That was why Chu Luyue was determined to help him to the end. Red Moon Desert. Senior? Shang Guanyu was at a loss. Wasn't that place full of danger? If ordinary people went there, they would have a 9 out of 10 chance of survival. Why was you rushing there? Furthermore, he even said that he was acquainted with an elder? Chu Luyue smiled and nodded. Yes. Previously, it was all thanks to their help that we were able to successfully leave the Red Moon Desert. Out of all the people that Chu Luyue knew, the few of them were the strongest ones. Other than them, she really couldn't think of anyone else she could ask for help. Moreover, it just so happened that they had sent Xue to deliver the news, so it would be good to go and take a look. This time, Hongyu and I are not sure when we will return. Therefore, there are many things in the Tianling dynasty that I need you to take care of. Of course, Shang Guanyu would not object. Don't worry. With me around, you can do whatever you want. Chu Luyue looked a little apologetic. I wanted to let you have some leisure time, but I didn't expect, in the end, I still have to trouble you. What's so troublesome about that? Shang Guanyu looked at her disapprovingly. Moreover, you are my daughter. If I don't help you, who else can I help? Don't worry. Now that I have recovered, nothing will happen to me. Chu Luyue felt a warmth in her heart. In fact, she came back this time to let her father have a good rest and make up for what he had done before. However, she didn't expect so many things to happen after that. She joked. If I had known, I wouldn't have agreed to your and Taizu's proposal to ascend the throne that day. In the end, you are still the one who is busy with these things. Shang Guanyu laughed. Anyway, this position will be yours sooner or later. It's better to be early than late. The Tianling royal family has no descendants in this lifetime. In addition, Shang Guanwan had attacked many people. The royal family's descendants were either dead or disabled, or they were still young. Among them, the only one who could shoulder the burden was Chu Luyue. When do you plan to go? Shang Guanyu asked. Chu Luyue and Mu Hongyu looked at each other. Today. The sun was scorching in the Red Moon Desert. Yellow sand covered the sky as far as the eye could see. The heat waves were rolling, and even the air was distorted. A snow-white figure suddenly appeared in the sky above the desert. Following closely behind was a red-tailed phoenix with its wings spread out. Chu Luyue and Mu Hongyu stood on Dumpling's back, their clothes fluttering in the wind. We'll be there soon, Chu Luyue said. Mu Hongyu nodded, but her eyes fell on Xue in front of her from time to time. She seemed to be distracted. This figure, why does it look so familiar? Hongyao, what are you thinking about? Chu Luyue had long noticed that Mu Hongyu's state was a little strange. Along the way, she seemed to be a little absent-minded. Nothing, I just feel that this white lion is quite familiar. Mu Hongyu murmured in a low voice. When she saw Xue rushing towards the desert below, a light suddenly flashed in her mind. Right. This white lion was very similar to the divine beast they had seen in the mystic forest. Shue shue. This is Rong Xiu's magical beast, Chu Luiyue explained. When they were in the palace, Rong Xiu had summoned Shue shue out. Many people had seen it, so there was no need to deliberately hide it. What? You said it is the divine beast of His Highness Prince Li? Mu Hongyu was shocked. The news of Rong Xiu having a divine beast was still a hot topic in the entire West Hill some time ago. Although she didn't pay attention to it deliberately, she had heard about it. She didn't expect it to be. Then, if this was really the one they saw previously, didn't that mean that Rong Xiu was actually here at that time? What's wrong? Chu Luiyue saw that her reaction was a little strange and asked. Mu Hongyu hesitated for a moment, and was about to speak, when she suddenly heard a rustling sound from the desert below. The two of them looked down together. Yellow sand rolled on several undulating sand dunes, creating a huge commotion. Chu Luiyue immediately said, "Seniors, it's me." An androgynous snort seemed to come from afar. "Lass, you still know to come back?" This was Lan Zhao's voice. Although it sounded angry, there was no anger. Instead, there was a trace of joy that he was trying his best to restrain. "Hurry up and come down." Chu Luiyue couldn't help but laugh. She didn't know why, but when she heard this voice again, she actually felt very close. "Hongyu, let's go down." She gently patted Dumpling's head, and then jumped. Sigh. Before Mu Hongyu could ask clearly, she saw that she had gone down, and could only follow closely behind. The moment Chu Luiyue landed, the yellow sand under her feet moved quickly and sent her forward. It wasn't until he saw the sparkling sapphire-like lake that he finally stopped. Chu Luiyue had just stood still when she heard Diwu Zhang's surprised voice. Lass, you broke through to become a stage 7 warrior?" Chapter 10:17. Because it was too unexpected, Diwu Zhangzi didn't send a voice transmission to Chu Luiyue like Lan Xiao, so it spread across the desert. Mu Hongyu, who rushed over, heard the voice and immediately looked around vigilantly. "Who is it?" Chu Luiyue smiled comfortingly. "Don't worry, these are the people I mentioned to you before." The one who spoke was Senior Diwu Zhangzi. "Hee, little girl, you actually don't remember me?" Elder Diwu Zhangzi laughed. "Seems like you haven't suffered enough from the previous time?" Mu Hongyu was stunned. Then, she suddenly recalled something, and her eyes widened in shock. Why you, it was you last time." Whoosh! A cloud of yellow sand suddenly condensed and flew in front of Mu Hongyu. Swoosh! Mu Hongyu's figure instantly disappeared from the spot. Other than leaving an extremely light spatial fluctuation, almost no one would notice anything unusual. Chu Luiyue's eyes flickered. If she hadn't broken through to become a stage 7 warrior and had sharper senses, she probably wouldn't have been able to detect this small fluctuation. The faint Yuan body was indeed worthy of its reputation. In the next moment, Mu Hongyu appeared on a sand dune 1,000 feet away. Phew, luckily I dodged it. Mu Hongyu was secretly rejoicing when she realized that the cloud of yellow sand was still floating quietly in the same spot, and didn't chase after her at all. She was in a daze and realized that she seemed to have overreacted. "Ha ha ha. Seems like you've improved during this period of time." Diwu Zhangzi laughed loudly. Poof! That cloud of yellow sand scattered on the ground. Mu Hongyu blushed slightly, and realized that he was just teasing her. Chu Luiyue looked at the lake helplessly. "Senior Diwu, you tortured Hongyu badly last time. Please don't make fun of her." Mu Hongyu appeared beside Chu Luiyue in a flash and smiled embarrassedly. "Luyu, don't worry. I'm fine. If it wasn't for the senior's guidance, I wouldn't have improved so quickly." Although her face was still a little red, her tone was very sincere and magnanimous. She was indeed grateful for Diwu Zhangzi's help from the bottom of her heart. As she spoke, she solemnly bowed to the other side to express her gratitude. Seeing that Mu Hongyu was in such a good mood, Chu Luiyue was also relieved. Diwu Zhangzi, on the other hand, was a little surprised. Good. This child is worth teaching. To be able to become friends with you, all aspects would not be lacking. Tianjing Yuan Meridian? At this moment, another familiar voice sounded. "When did you recover?" Although the tone was cold and arrogant, it was a pity that the silver voice was soft and childish. It was not intimidating at all. Following this voice, Ripples appeared on the surface of the lake. Chu Luiyue laughed. Just a few days ago. Duga Mabao snorted. That's more like it. After everyone learned that Chu Luiyue had recovered the Tianjin Yuan meridian, they were either shocked, envious, or in disbelief. In short, there were all kinds of emotions. Only Duga Mabao did not have such feelings. There was a slight disdain, and a full sense of matter of fact. It seemed that Chu Luiyue's recovery of the Tianjin Yuan meridian was normal and barely acceptable. Mu Hongyu secretly stuck her tongue out at Chu Luiyue. Although they didn't see him, just hearing his words was enough to shock them. The Tianjin Yuan meridian was such a rare talent. In the entire Tianling dynasty, there had only been 2 people with it in the past 1,000 years. Countless people in the world were envious of it. And when it came to this senior, it was actually just a little bit. Mu Hongyu now vaguely understood why Chu Luiyue said that the seniors here might be able to help her with the faint Yuan body. Chu Luiyue did not seem to mind, and his eyes were curved. It was a coincidence, and I was lucky. I recovered when I broke through to become a stage 7 warrior. The corner of Mu Hongyu's eyes twitched fiercely. These people are so perverted. She vaguely felt that if she continued to stay here, her days would not be too good. Although she was already mentally prepared, she realized that she was still too naive until now. Other than the appointment, I came here this time to ask the seniors for a favor. What she was afraid of came true. Just as Mu Hongyu's heart was trembling, Chu Luiyue grabbed her hand and pushed it forward. Hongyu has the faint Yuan body, and she's getting closer and closer to becoming a stage 7 warrior. I once read in an ancient book that the divine tribulation of the faint Yuan body is extremely difficult to pass. So, I would like to ask the seniors for help and guidance. I wonder. This small matter is naturally not a problem. Diwu Zhangzi agreed immediately. With me here, I guarantee to help her successfully pass the divine tribulation. Chu Luiyue's eyes lit up. Are you really willing to help? What's the big deal? The faint Yuan body is a good seedling after all. It would be a pity if it was wasted. Diwu Zhangzi couldn't help but sneer as he spoke. Those mediocre people of the Tianling dynasty will only delay her. For the next period of time, you just have to stay here until you pass the divine tribulation. Since he said so, he really intended to help. Thank you, Senior Diwu. Mu Hongyu also hurriedly bowed respectfully. Thank you, Senior Diwu. After finalizing this matter, Chu Luiyue breathed a sigh of relief. By the way, may I know why the seniors have asked me to come here? After settling Mu Hongyu, Chu Luiyue turned his attention back to this matter. Diwu Zhangzi didn't answer immediately. Instead, he seemed to hesitate. I'll let Debao tell you. I'll bring her around to familiarize herself with the environment first. After saying that, he shouted, Brother, Hongyu, come quickly. Mu Hongyu hurriedly replied, That's right. Oh, okay. After speaking, she looked at Chu Luiyue hesitantly. Chu Luiyue gave her a reassuring look. Just go ahead. Mu Hongyu nodded. A cloud of yellow sand suddenly appeared beside her. Oh, it's here again. Mu Hongyu wailed and scurried away instantly. Soon, only Chu Luiyue was left here. The sun was scorching hot, and there was no wind around. However, ripples appeared on the surface of the lake not far away. Come here. It was Lan Zhao's voice. Chu Luiyue followed the voice and walked over. When she reached the lakeside, she subconsciously looked down. There seemed to be dark shadows gathering in the clear lake. Actually, I asked you to come this time because Debao needs your help with something. Lan Zhao's tone was a little strange. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Debao wanted her help? These people were all very strong, especially Debao. What did he need her help with? As long as it's within my power, I won't refuse. I wonder, what's the matter? Lan Zhao said lightly. Debao, do you want me to help you? Or do you want to tell the girl yourself? Dead silence. After a while, Duga Mabao's extremely awkward voice was heard. I've condensed a divine body, and need your power as a primer to awaken it. Chapter 10:18. Divine Body. Primer? Chu Luiyue was dazed when she heard that. This divine body is, after a cultivator breaks through the stage 9 and enters the godly realm, he can use the force of heaven and earth to refine his body and form a divine body. A normal cultivator's physical strength is limited, but a divine body is different. It has unlimited potential. And once a cultivator reaches the paragon stage, he will be immortal. Therefore, a divine body is very important to a cultivator. More importantly, once a cultivator reaches this stage, even if his physical body is destroyed, he can refine it again and reconstruct a divine body. Our physical bodies have been destroyed, and we are only left with a few souls. We relied on the force of heaven and earth to refine a divine body. As long as we awaken the divine body, Debeo will be able to leave this place. Chu Luiyue blinked, and joy appeared on her face. That's a great thing. If my strength is able to help you, I will definitely do my best to help you. She knew that Dugu Mabao and the others were trapped here for some reason and couldn't leave. They could only come out for a short, while during the red moon every month. Most of the time, they stayed in the desert in the dark. Now that Dugu Mabao had a divine body, they could come out in the future. The world was so big, where couldn't they go? This is a good thing. But there is a small problem with Debeo. Lan Zhao's tone sounded like he was trying to hold back his laughter. What problem? Chu Luiyue asked. Actually, it's nothing. When you rushed back to Xiling, he was anxious to help you, so he sped up the process of refining the divine body. Lan Zhao, if you don't want your tongue, I can pull it out for you. Dugu Mabao's voice was filled with murderous intent. Okay. I won't say any more. You can tell you, or yourself. Lan Zhao begged for mercy, and it was rare that he didn't fight with Dugu Mabao. This made Chu Luiyue feel even more strange. This divine body was so important. Since it had been refined, what other problems could there be? And why does Lan Zhao sound like this has something to do with me? She thought for a moment and said, Senior, where is your divine body now? What should I do to wake him up? Just as he finished speaking, the waves on the surface of the water suddenly became bigger. Then, a whirlpool appeared in the center of the sapphire lake. The ripples spread out in all directions, and the center gradually caved in. A cocoon suffused with a faint purple light slowly rose from within. A divine and powerful pressure faintly came from above. Just by standing there, Chu Luiyue already felt a stifling feeling in his chest. The origin power in his body suddenly slowed down at this moment. This was the aura of an absolute crushing powerhouse. Chu Luiyue was secretly shocked. This was just a divine body that had yet to awaken, yet it was already so terrifying. Who knew how astonishing Dugu Mabao's true strength was? At this moment, a gentle yet powerful energy suddenly gushed out from the water droplet in her body, entering her limbs and bones. That oppressive feeling dissipated by a lot. However, Chu Luiyue still held her breath and looked ahead without blinking, not daring to miss a single thing. My divine body is inside here. For some reason, Dugu Mabao's voice sounded even more awkward. Later, you just need to prick your index finger and inject some origin power into it. Chu Luiyue nodded slightly. Okay. Then, the cocoon of light flew toward Chu Luiyue. Perhaps Dugu Mabao had purposely restrained his aura, so Chu Luiyue did not feel any stronger pressure. With the support of the water droplet's power, she could barely stand still. At this moment, Chu Luiyue thought of a problem. Why does this cocoon of light look a little small? Since it's a divine body, it shouldn't look like this. This thought flashed through his mind. Soon, the cocoon of light floated to a step away from Chu Luiyue. There was a faint layer of purple on the cocoon of light, which was magnificent and beautiful. It was a blur inside, and she could not see it clearly. Chu Luiyue did not think much of it. She bit her index finger, and a dark red blood droplet quickly appeared. Then, the blood droplet seemed to be guided by some kind of power. It left Chu Luiyue's fingertip and floated toward the cocoon of light. Of course, at the same time, it contained an extremely rich origin power. The blood droplet quickly landed in the middle of the cocoon of light. The moment it touched the cocoon of light, the blood droplet quickly disappeared. Then, with a buzzing sound, the cocoon of light suddenly shone brightly. Chu Luiyue instinctively raised her hand to cover her eyes. The purple light shone brightly. Crack! Chu Luiyue clearly heard the sound of something breaking. When the light gradually dissipated, she looked up and looked ahead. With one look, she was stunned on the spot. The cocoon of light had disappeared. It was as if a layer of gauze had been lifted, and she could finally see the situation inside. A child who looked to be 3 or 4 years old was quietly floating in the air. His small face was fair and cute, pink and chubby. His eyelashes were unbelievably thick and slightly curled. He had short purple hair that was fluffy and soft. When the breeze blew, it gently fluttered. As if sensing Chu Luiyue's gaze, he suddenly opened his eyes. A pair of purple eyes. They were so beautiful that they were almost demonic. The two of them looked at each other. He frowned, and his expression was fierce. "What are you looking at? Haven't you seen it before?" This sentence was originally very imposing, but it was a pity that the voice was too cute and did not have much deterrence. Chu Luiyue came back to her senses, stretched out her hand and pointed. Debao, you're not wearing clothes." Chapter 10:19. Dugumabao's face froze for a moment. Then, Chu Luiyue saw his face turn red at a speed visible to the naked eye. It was as though blood was dripping out. Boom! A purple flame suddenly exploded in front of Chu Luiyue. She immediately retreated and narrowly avoided it. A strand of hair on her forehead was burnt, emitting a faint burnt smell. The little person opposite her was quickly covered in a layer of faint purple light. Then he waved his little hands. When the light dissipated, he had already changed into a purple robe. The robe was very exquisite. Under the sunlight, it reflected a faint glow and looked more like a soft armor. Chu Luiyue looked at the scene in front of her with a complicated expression. Originally, this appearance was supposed to be majestic and dignified, but unfortunately, Dabao's image had completely collapsed in her heart. Ha 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 ha. A burst of loud laughter suddenly erupted from the lake. "Dabao! Ha 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 ha. You didn't wear any clothes when you saw you. Ha 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 ha." Lan Xiao always spoke casually like an immortal. This was the first time Chu Luiyue heard such a forthright laugh from him. The corner of her eyes twitched slightly. I seem to have laughed a little too loudly. Indeed, the more Lan Xiao laughed, the more gloomy Dabao's face became. Her face, which was originally red, immediately turned black and red. The newly condensed godly body didn't wear any clothes, but he was careless just now and forgot about it. Moreover, the process was very difficult. The three of them had been trapped here for many years, and he was the first to succeed. "You haven't even condensed half a godly body. What right do you have to laugh here?" Dabao gritted his teeth and said. Lan Xiao didn't sense the danger at all. Instead, he laughed even harder. "Ha ha ha ha. But you didn't wear any clothes. Ha 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 ha. Are you done laughing?" Dabao said each word coldly, as if there was endless pressure. "Ha ha ha." Lan Xiao's voice stopped abruptly. Poof! There was a sudden explosion in the lake. Then, the surroundings finally quieted down. The whirlpool in the lake quickly recovered, leaving only a few ripples. Dugumabao's back was facing Chu Luiyue. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. However, he did not turn around for a long time. The atmosphere was very awkward. "Dabao!" Chu Luiyue stood still for a while. Seeing that he still hadn't moved, he couldn't help but call out to him. Dugumabao resigned himself to his fate and turned around. "What?" He raised his chin slightly and asked coldly with an expressionless face. The corners of his eyes and the tips of his brows seemed to carry a hint of impatience. Chu Luiyue shifted his gaze. The expression on his little face had already returned to normal, but there was still a trace of redness on his ears that had not yet faded. He looked like a child who had done something wrong and refused to admit his mistake. This way, even if they knew that he had a divine body, the threat he posed was still zero. Chu Luiyue held back his laughter and said with a very serious and sincere expression, "Dabao, did I help you?" Only then did Dabao's expression soften a little. He turned his face and looked into the distance. After a moment he responded with an Chu Luiyue smiled, his eyes curved. "That's good. However, can I ask, why can I help you like this?" Chu Luiyue's eyes were filled with curiosity. Although she had broken through to become a rank 7 warrior, and even had a strand of divine power stored in her body. It didn't seem like it was the turn of a cultivator of her level to awaken a divine body, right? Why didn't she know that she was so powerful? Dugumabao frowned. Of course it's because of you, it's you. Chu Luiwa was stunned. What did he mean by that? Dugumabao glanced at her and saw her blank expression. He suddenly remembered that she had forgotten those things. He opened his mouth, but when the words reached his mouth, he changed his mind. After the divine body is successfully condensed, a certain amount of divine power is needed as a primer. Coincidentally, you have a strand of divine power in your body, so... Chu Liyue's eyes flickered as she smiled faintly. I have divine power, and it's something that only happened recently. Could it be that you already knew at that time? So you got Shue to deliver the news? Debeo and the other two were indeed powerful, but they couldn't leave the Red Moon Desert, so it was impossible for them to know about these things so quickly. In other words, they must have made this plan long ago. Then it definitely wasn't because of the divine power in her body. Dugumabao choked and immediately said, You misheard. You heard wrong. I was talking about the heavenly energy. You had it in your body before, didn't you? Chu Luiyue smiled but didn't say anything. The two of them were standing face to face, so of course she couldn't have heard wrongly. Moreover, there were 3 strands of heavenly Dao power in her body. One was obtained when she broke open the Tianling God realm, and the other 2 were obtained from the legendary 3-eyed eagle and dumpling. However, she was very tactful and didn't continue asking. Dugumabao obviously didn't want to answer this question directly now, so there was no point in asking anymore. Thus, she nodded to show that she understood and changed the topic. I see. Oh right, just now, Senior Lan Xiao said that you seem to have only... When Lan Xiao said a small problem, he was probably referring to Dugumabao's divine body being too young. Even though he always sounded like a child, Chu Luiyue definitely didn't believe that Dugumabao was a real 3-year-old child. This matter seemed to have something to do with her? Dugumabao frowned and returned to his usual expressionless face. It has nothing to do with you. Puffed. Suddenly, a chuckle sounded beside his ear. Girl, don't listen to his excuses. Chu Luiyue was stunned. This was Lan Zhao's voice. She looked up and saw that Dugumabao didn't seem to have any reaction. Girl, don't worry. You can't hear this. We still have the ability to do that. You just have to listen to me. Chu Luiyue lowered her eyes and listened quietly, as if she was thinking about something. However, she was actually listening to Lan Xiao. He doesn't want to tell you these things, but I have to tell you. Lan Xiao stopped teasing her and became much more serious. We already know that you were harmed by that adulterous couple. Back then, you returned to Xiling to take revenge, right? Actually, at that time, we also wanted to help you and support you. Unfortunately, the 3 of us were trapped here and couldn't leave. Only by condensing a divine body could we break out of this cage. You should also be able to see that Big Bao is the strongest among us. He can also condense a divine body the fastest. In fact, he still needed 3 years to succeed. But at that time, in order to help you, he decided to forcefully break through. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat as she vaguely guessed something. Lan Xiao sighed softly. He broke through in advance. Although he barely succeeded, it's a pity that in the end, he really became like this. Once the divine body is condensed, it's hard to change. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.